Our boy Dion was reincarnated into a peaceful world, far from the chaos of his past life. In this new beginning, he lived quietly with his family, spending his days hunting in the nearby forest just to keep food on the table. Life was simple, yet it lacked purpose. Driven by a desire to grow stronger and explore what lay beyond the familiar woods, our boy eventually made a bold decision. He left his village behind to travel the world alone. But during one cold night on the road, something strange happened. Glimmering spirits appeared before him, floating in the dark silence. Their presence was clear, yet their voices were mute. He couldn't hear them. And strangely, no one else could see them either. He didn't know what it meant, but it felt like the start of something much bigger. From a quiet hunter to a traveler marked by spirits, our boy's real journey had just begun. Let's go back where it all started. Dion was running through the forest, his breaths sharp and heavy, with monsters close behind him. His mind raced as fast as his legs. There were 4 of them. He thought it'd be a smooth ride, but the universe bent him over and served chaos on a flaming plate right at the dam end. But he had already made up his mind. If he could make it through this, he would be one step closer to his goal. Dion didn't even flinch, just yanked out a kunai and yeeted it straight into the monster's skull. One hit, dead on. That ugly bastard dropped like Wi-Fi during a storm. Dion pressed forward, his thoughts focused. Fighting monsters was hard, but it was one of the few ways he could truly measure his limits. Others called it reckless. He saw it as leveling up with monsters as his personal punching bags. Whatever happened now, he had no intention of turning back. Surviving meant risking everything. He had escaped death several times thanks to the dagger-throwing skills he learned during his army days. Training alone for so long had prepared him for this moment, to finally step out into the world on his own terms. One of the ugly beasts lunged at Dion, claws flying for his chest. Dion sliced its ugly mug mid-air with a kunai, sent that freak face first to the dirt. Only 2 clowns left now. He had taken down the rest with a single precise strike. Out of nowhere, the last 2 freaks charged like idiots. Dion didn't waste a second. Kunai flashed, and both got their ugly asses tagged in one clean swipe. But the effort knocked him off balance, and he crashed onto the ground. As he struggled to catch his breath, one of the monsters, seemingly still alive, came falling down toward him. Dion tensed up, not sure if the nightmare was done. Then a damn deadweight crashed right on him. Took a sec to click. The ugly bastard was toast. Relief hit, but his muscles stayed ready for round 2. He pushed the monster's weight off and stared up at the gray sky. Even after all of this, it felt the same. No matter how extreme his actions became, he still felt numb inside. Achievements like this didn't fill the emptiness, but if he didn't push himself like this, that hollowness would grow unbearable. At this pace, he feared becoming a lifeless shell. It was time to stop hesitating. Everything needed to be put into order. Today, the plan had to move forward. Finally, he was ready to leave this place behind. Shouldering those dead freaks like trophies, Dion stomped his way back home. His thoughts were tangled, circling the same memory over and over. The reason he made this decision was because he remembered his past life. He had thought about it thousands, no, tens of thousands of times, but still couldn't figure it out. How did he die? Why did he remember his previous lives? The questions haunted him, but the answers remained distant and blurry. 16 years had passed in this reincarnated world, yet his memories of living 28 years before remained intact. Since the moment of his rebirth, he'd carried the mind of a 28-year-old, constantly feeling like a stranger trapped in a younger body. That unfamiliar mindset made him question what he was supposed to do in this life. As he arrived home, Dion greeted his father. His father responded, noting Dion's late return and how difficult the hunt must have been. Monster hunting, especially at his age, was no small task. He reminded Dion to always be careful. Dion acknowledged him and placed his bag down. In his heart, though, the bond felt hollow. No matter how much he tried, his father didn't feel like his real one. This was one of the unfortunate consequences of being reincarnated. His father invited him inside, saying dinner was ready. At the dining table, a large spread of food had already been prepared. His mother welcomed him warmly and asked him to join them. Dion observed his family, his father Mudo, his mother Lona, his eldest brother Daimon, and his other siblings. The aroma of the food brought joy to everyone. His brothers and sisters were visibly excited. His father praised Dion for bringing meat home often, and his mother added that the whole village admired him for it. The family sat together at the table. Dion quietly reflected on the harmony around him, but inside, he felt conflicted. Though everything looked peaceful, a strange emptiness lingered. Questions about his former family, old friends, and a lover from a forgotten life clouded his mind. Everything in this new world remained confusing. Breaking the silence, Dion expressed his desire to go on a trip. His sudden statement startled everyone. His father asked if there was a reason behind this decision. Dion had already made up his mind. He was leaving the place where he couldn't truly belong, hoping to find the reason for his existence. Even if he revealed that he was a reincarnator, nothing would change. Acceptance was uncertain, but the urge to move forward couldn't be denied. He stated his wish to see a wider world and explore beyond. He was at the age where adventure called to him. His brothers scoffed hard, roasting his dumbass move. One even joked if just being talented meant he was some kind of badass. His sister wondered why he wanted to leave so suddenly. Their father slammed his hand on the table, silencing everyone. Dion felt a shift in the atmosphere. His father hadn't raised his voice, but the weight of his words calmed the entire room. Then his father spoke, saying he had always known Dion was different. Despite having no formal training, Dion had hunted monsters. He had learned to speak and write faster than his siblings and introduced revolutionary farming methods. Though quiet, Dion's uniqueness was always evident. From these signs, his father sensed that Dion was hiding something. Dion admitted to himself that, while he hadn't revealed everything, his family had sensed something was off. Deep down, he felt they didn't fully accept him. His father continued, saying Dion's bloodline, part demonic, part angelic, was nothing to be ashamed of. He shouldn't carry the burden alone. Regardless of anything, they were a family, and he was proud to call Dion his son. Dion felt gratitude but knew he still couldn't speak the truth. Someday he might, but not now. He needed to find his purpose, and his decision to leave remained firm. He calmly responded, saying he understood everything but needed to explore a bigger world to learn more about himself. His father asked if this was his final decision. Dion confirmed it. He had already thought it through and was resolved. Respecting his choice, his father asked about his plans. Dion said he would follow the upper edge of the village as he left. His father stepped closer and confirmed. Dion would be leaving tomorrow. Dion nodded. His father agreed to the plan, saying a man whose heart is set should not be stopped. Suddenly, Dion's mother raised her voice, questioning her husband about any future plans. She couldn't bear to see her son go. His father reassured her, saying he always knew this day would arrive. But she was still unwilling to let Dion leave so easily. The next morning arrived. Dion moved quietly, preparing to depart. He thought it felt odd to leave without saying goodbye, but slipping away silently was the best way. Just then, his father appeared, having caught him in the act. He asked Dion why he hadn't said goodbye. Dion apologized and asked about his mother. His father explained she was too emotional and had stayed inside to avoid crying, but he had waited to give Dion something. Handing him a pendant, his father instructed him to find Dolomek in the Flaren Tower if he ever reached the Rosahin Kingdom. If the man was still alive, he would help Dion. Dion took the pendant, wearing it with a quiet thank you. His father wished him well, telling him to take care and hoping he would find what he was looking for. Dion turned and left. Behind him, his mother approached his father and quietly said that Dion had truly left. His father responded with calm confidence. Their son would be fine. Elsewhere, Dion ran toward a carriage and approached the old man in charge, asking if there were any seats left. The old man confirmed and told him to board. As Dion climbed in, his eyes fell on a girl standing nearby. As their eyes met, she quickly covered her face. The old man shot Dion a glare like he'd just caught him stealing snacks. Dion apologized politely. Then the old man mentioned a safety contract, and Dion instantly knew this was just adult-level robbery with paperwork. Using magic, the old man confirmed Dion's sharpness and asked for his name. As Dion gave his name, he looked down at his hand, amazed by the magic's effect. The old man explained that Dion was a new traveler. Since he wasn't registered, the man had done it for him. The seat sucked, but Dion took it, because nothing says luxury like bouncing your butt off a wooden plank while dodging monster guts. Dion's thoughts drifted once more. To his father, his mother, and the family he left behind, he silently thanked them. Even if the path ahead was harsh, he would walk it with determination. He had left his hometown behind to discover the truth of his past. The carriage rolled ahead, dragging him into the unknown. No map, no plan, just vibes and potential disaster. As Dion sat in the carriage, he quietly listened to the conversations around him. A few travelers were talking among themselves. One of them asked if the name of the top part of the route was Tilton. Another confirmed it and mentioned that they traded goods across the continent. He asked for updates if anyone learned where the top part was headed next. A third person said the route would pass through Holton, but the schedule beyond that hadn't been decided yet. Someone asked if only merchants were traveling, and another replied that wasn't the case. There were guards protecting the caravan too. Beside him, another traveler added that they had mercenaries and wizards accompanying them. Dion sat there, watching everyone treat travel like a damn treasure hunt. Meanwhile, he felt dead inside, wondering if he was the only one not high on adventure fumes. He looked around at the diverse people surrounding him. Wizards who trusted their wisdom, mercenaries who relied on strength and survival instincts. Their lives were so different from anything he'd experienced. In his past life, thoughts like these never crossed his mind. Now, everything felt new and unfamiliar. He pieced out a home with no clue, no plan. Just winging it like a broke NPC on side quest mode, he tried to stay open to the journey. 16 years of running on emotional airplane mode, and now the void was finally knocking, loud as hell and hard to ignore. In his previous life, he had achieved both success and love, but now only memories remained. That emotional gap between old him and new him chewed at his brain like a pissed-off raccoon, slow, messy, and hard to shake. A deep hole had formed in his heart. He found it foolish to dwell too much on such thoughts. He reminded himself that since he had this new life, he didn't need to be limited. Maybe he could find something meaningful to fill the void. The rest could wait until later. As time passed, the carriage stopped, and the group began setting up camp. Dion noticed someone moving a wagon out of a tent and asked him about it. The man responded with mild surprise, asking if it was Dion's first time staying in the wilderness. Dion admitted it was. The man explained that, in places like this, travelers had to be ready for attacks from monsters and marauders. In an emergency, they would use the cart as a shield to fight back. Dion noted how similar it felt to a siege, and the man acknowledged his quick understanding. The man then told Dion to rest if he was finished organizing and said he would head inside first. Dion thanked him for his efforts. Alone again, Dion looked around the campsite. He was surprised by how knowledgeable and practical the people here were. Perhaps that was the key to survival in this world. In the distance, he saw a tent that seemed to belong to wizards. He had only ever read about such things in his previous life, and it amazed him that magic truly existed, though he couldn't ask them to teach him yet. He reassured himself. One day, the opportunity would come. As night fell, the camp settled into silence. Inside his tent, Dion slept peacefully. Suddenly, a glowing object floated into the tent and stopped right in front of his face. Jolted awake, Dion opened his eyes and saw a tiny figure shaped like a young girl hovering before him. He quickly sat up, startled by the sight, and tried to make sense of it. For a sec, he wondered if that was a ghost, or just some poor soul who'd been ghosted themselves and now looked like a walking nightmare. In a world full of magic, ghosts were about as real as his phone signal in a basement during a thunderstorm. The shiny blob showed up again. Turns out it was just some flashy-ass fairy trying to steal the spotlight. Dion looked at her in awe and gently held her in his hand. He couldn't believe how damn tiny she was. Her gestures seemed to be guiding him to come closer. The fairy smiled and tried to say something, but her voice didn't reach Dion. He sighed, thinking it had been ages since life hit him with something this surreal. This world was like one big episode of Stranger Things, full of weird twists and mind-bending surprises. The fairy fluttered above his head and then sat there. Dion held her gently again, hoping to understand her message. He spoke softly, hoping she wasn't deaf, but her words were pure nonsense, like she downloaded a bad translation app and forgot to update it. Despite his effort, he couldn't understand what she was trying to say. Right after, the fairy bounced without a trace. Dion felt a tiny sting, like when your crush ghosts you before you even get a chance to say hi. Just when he thought the show was over, the fairy came back, with a whole damn circus. Now he's stuck with a bunch of glow-in-the-dark freeloaders treating him like their personal nightclub. Dion looked around in amazement, wondering if she had brought her friends along. He closed his eyes and focused. A strange, warm feeling spread through him. It was as if he had entered a different realm, one that was separate from the human world. These fairies were innocent, pure, and noble. Communication with them didn't rely on words but flowed between the heart and mind. A soft breeze passed, and in that moment, Dion's consciousness seemed to vanish from his surroundings. Outside the tent, far in the distance, one of the guards noticed a sandstorm approaching. He checked through his telescope, eyes going wide like he just caught his girlfriend texting someone else. What he saw was straight up insane. No way this drama was supposed to start on day one. He quickly stood up and began sounding the emergency alarm. The loud warning startled everyone awake. As the alert echoed across the camp, he shouted that it was a monster attack. Instantly, the camp buzzed with urgency as everyone began preparing for battle. Back in his tent, Dion still slept unaware. But as the tension outside grew, his eyes suddenly shot open. Dion woke up, confused about what had just happened. He wasn't sure if he was tripping or if this was real life. Saw fairies and even caught their names. Felt like some spooky-ass spirits from Grandpa's creepy bedtime tales, or maybe he just stayed up too late scrolling weird videos again. Inside the tent, two men entered, talking to each other. One asked about the monster and what was going on. The other replied that it didn't seem like the right time for the monsters to be active. Noticing Dion, one man asked what he was doing. Dion said he was trying to understand the situation. The man warned him that it was too dangerous to be outside right now. He told Dion this was his rookie trip and to keep his ass tucked somewhere safe. Dion accepted the warning calmly. Outside the tent, everyone stood behind shields, fully prepared for battle. Dion sensed the tension in the air as soon as he stepped outside. He decided he had to see everything with his own eyes. His gaze landed on the wizards he had seen earlier in the carriage. In the wizard squad, Dion spotted a tiny brat and figured she was probably one of those basic magic nerds flexing weak-ass tricks nobody's impressed by. Suddenly, a man shouted that the monster was Hasax. The monster immediately began its attack. Some people announced that the scouts had been attacked by Hasax and that the formation needed to be rearranged. A priest declared it was a shame and that he needed to help. He called upon the power of the Invisible One who sees all things, asking for divine blessing and strength. Others acknowledged that the priest's blessing was divine power. They noted the presence of both wizards and priests. Dion recognized that the divine magic being used was the power of God. He realized the battle was about to begin. The monsters rapidly advanced toward them. A man ordered everyone to raise their shields and form a defensive line. They planned to stop the monsters first and then fight back. The monsters struck the shields with great force, breaking them. One man shouted that their defense had collapsed and they needed more protection. The formation was under threat, with too many monsters attacking. It was dangerous. Suddenly, a man used his power to strike a monster from behind the shield, risking his life. He then called out to the archers to shoot their arrows. The monster quickly turned and attacked him again. Watching this shit, Dion thought he'd crashed some secret anime boss fight he didn't sign up for. He was feeling every damn vibe like a clueless noob with broken-ass senses, even without staring. At that moment, the wizards approached and asked about everyone's condition and the current situation. One man said they had arrived just in time and suggested organizing their defense all at once. The wizards agreed, saying the problem would be solved shortly, and prepared to act. A wizard unleashed a flame ability, while an old wizard combined it with his wind power. The two attacks merged, creating a powerful assault. The old wizard then instructed a young female wizard named Linen to complete the order. Linen commanded them to amplify the gathered power and increase its strength. The three pulled their shit together, blasted the monsters with a hellfire combo, and lit them up like cursed marshmallows. Everyone watching was pleased by this display. Dion figured this had to be the real-ass power of magic. Wild, flashy, and totally cracked. It was hard to believe any of this shit was even possible, and yet, something deep inside him started twitching like his own power-up arc was loading. Suddenly, Dion heard someone calling for help. Turning around, he saw a remaining monster attacking a man. The man closed his eyes in fear, but opened them to find Dion had already defeated the monster. The man thanked Dion. Dion realized the wizards had won this battle. This outer area at the top remained dangerous, but for now the immediate threat was over. Dion quickly told the man to hide, reminding him the battle wasn't over yet. The man ran off without hesitation. Confused, Dion reflected on how his thrown dagger had pierced the thick shell of the haystacks. He questioned whether he truly had that much power. Although he could use an aura, now wasn't the time to overthink. He decided to act instead. It was time to test his strength. His first goal, he had to wipe the floor with the side mobs, then zero in on Hasax and beat the shit out of that oversized clown like it was personal. Just as a few monsters moved in to attack, Dion launched his dagger and took them down. He was low-key shook he even landed those hits, felt unreal as hell. Some weird-ass mist started swirling around his hands too, like his powers were glitching into god mode. Two dudes posted up behind Dion started hyping him up. Legit impressed, he poked that Hasax freak with nothing but a damn butter knife. Dion replied modestly, admitting it wasn't enough yet. They appreciated his humility and asked him to continue helping them. Still puzzled, Dion tried to make sense of everything. With the magician's support and the relentless effort of the mercenaries, the remaining Hasax were gradually being wiped out. The battle, which had lasted all night, finally came to an end at dawn. By the next morning, the atmosphere shifted to the aftermath. One guy checked his cut, bitched to his boss that the pay was dog shit, and looked ready to throw hands over it. The boss dismissed the matter, asking who had died. The man mentioned that Sund had been the first to fall. Meanwhile, Dion observed everything silently. It was his first time experiencing the aftermath of such a battle, and the toll it had taken was overwhelming. The fallen comrades were buried by their teams, their weapons and equipment collected. The living dealt with grief in different ways. Some visibly mourned, while others accepted it as part of their routine. For Dion, it was his first time stepping into the world of mercenaries, yet he felt strangely unaffected. Perhaps it was because these were just the early days, or maybe that's simply how he was wired. Whatever the reason, he moved forward. His eyes drifted to Linen, and damn, she was looking like a damn goddess. So fine it was fucking distracting, making his brain short-circuit and his dumbass get all kinds of horny. She was definitely the same young wizard from before. Linen approached and asked if his name was Dion. He confirmed it, recognizing her as a wizard. Without further explanation, she told him to follow her. Dion, curious, asked where they were going. Linen led him into a tent. As he entered, Dion realized it was the tent of the wizards. Inside the tent, the old wizard recognized Dion and reminded him of their earlier meeting. Dion confirmed it, recalling how the wizard had helped him at the start of his journey. The old wizard brought up the haystacks Dion had taken down, explaining that he was called in to settle that matter. Dion had caught around 14, which the old wizard admitted was impressive. He informed Dion that his share amounted to 5 gold coins. Although the price was a bit low, he asked if it was acceptable. Dion considered it. He already knew monsters held monetary value, but 5 gold coins was a significant amount, enough to support his family for 3 months. The old wizard apologized, noting how greedy mercenaries could be. Dion expressed his gratitude regardless. Impressed, the old man appreciated Dion's lack of greed and asked again if it was truly his first journey. Dion replied that he had just wanted to explore the world. Hearing that, 2 assholes nearby cracked a brutal-ass joke that Dion was prime fucking age to die in some shitty-ass foreign hellhole. The old wizard, however, said Dion was either a fool or destined to become a great hero. If fate allowed, they would cross paths again. After leaving the tent, Dion pondered over everything. He wondered if he was truly doing well. The sky and stars above reminded him of his past life, and in that moment, it felt like enough. Soon after, the group began moving out. Dion joined them and sat quietly in the carriage. His thoughts wandered as the journey continued. People were still dying, and the number of mercenaries had clearly decreased since the beginning. Yet, it didn't seem to matter. Several battles had taken place since then, against bandits and even goblins. This journey, where death was always near, felt eerie. Over time, Dion grew closer to the mercenaries after fighting alongside them. Yet, some disliked him, blaming him for reducing their shares. He realized it was impossible to please everyone. Through it all, he learned the importance of money, just as in his previous life. That similarity struck him. How money had always played such a crucial role. It was strange, even amusing, how life revolved around a paycheck. He overheard the mercenaries talking about how expensive equipment was. In particular, potions were unimaginably costly. That made Dion think, to earn money, perhaps becoming a wizard or a retainer would be a better path. Suddenly, two glowing lights appeared before him again. Dion stared, startled. He hadn't seen them since that night. The experience had been unusual. Thinking about it more, he realized he hadn't seen the fairy again either. He remembered her name, Sylph. He had called her Sylph. Dion recalled the moment he first sensed the spirits, believing his connection to them began back then. Though he had no proof, he trusted his instincts and felt he might be able to see even more spirits in the future. The answer to why this was happening seemed distant and unclear, and even if he asked, he doubted he'd truly understand. Still, he wondered if there was any way to learn more about spirits. Lucky for his sorry ass, his squad had both spell-slinging wizards and holy buff dealers, so at least he wasn't fucked completely. That might help, but he hadn't learned the name of the wizard girl yet. She seemed like someone who could assist, but approaching her wasn't going to be easy. So Dion decided he would wait until they reached the next town before trying again. Before leaving, Dion gave a simple farewell to the fairy, parting ways with a soft goodbye and a promise to meet again. After arriving at a new place, Dion muttered to himself that finding her was more difficult than he expected. They were only a few days away from reaching Holton. If he tried visiting the accommodations alone, it might cause unnecessary misunderstandings. Maybe Holton held some answers, but he wasn't sure if he should give up just yet. His thoughts then turned towards something more immediate: the cost of gear. Equipment prices were outrageously high, and after their last battle, he was left with only 5 golds. It was no wonder mercenaries always talked about money. Now he understood what they meant when they said gear was expensive. Just a few pieces had drained resources that could have covered years of basic living expenses. In that moment, his eyes found her, the wizard girl, and damn, she looked so hot. It was like magic straight to his damn soul. He called out to her, raising his voice slightly to get her attention. As he approached, he greeted her, trying to stay casual. She responded, but her words were short and distant. Dion was taken aback by her curt reply. Still, he continued and politely asked if she had a moment. He had a question he wanted to ask. She allowed it with a brief nod. Her responses remained just as short, but Dion thought it might be easier to speak plainly rather than expect detailed replies from her. He quickly moved to the point, mentioning her identity as a wizard and asked if she knew anything about spirits. She gave a vague answer. Hayden's morning beer, room 502, McGarden. Dion paused, recalling that important figures were said to be staying there. It became clear she was directing him to McGarden, room 502. He thanked her for the tip and then introduced himself, adding his name in the hope of learning hers in return. She offered her name briefly and then turned away without another word. Dion watched her walk off and couldn't help but think that she too was just as strange as he was. Dion reached the location Lennon had mentioned and approached a man to inquire further. The man recognized Dion's curiosity and began explaining. He said that understanding spirits and magic wasn't simple. Magic required preparation, and wizards were defined by their ability to combine magical elements. The strength of a wizard depended on how many magic combinations they could perform. Dion recalled the previous battle, wondering if that was what he had seen. The man clarified that being able to combine 3 types of magic was the threshold for being called a wizard. What Dion witnessed that day was only a small glimpse of the greater system. This explanation helped Dion understand the mechanics of magic more clearly. The man then asked Dion if he had met Lennon. Dion confirmed it. He expressed surprise that Dion had managed to talk to her, given that most people avoided her. Dion's courage, according to him, was as impressive as his dagger skills. Dion silently questioned what people were afraid of when it came to Lennon. The conversation shifted as the man returned to Dion's original question. He asked if Dion really wanted to know about spirits. He noted that the number of spirits had been decreasing rapidly in recent times, which many found unusual. Dion shared that in his village, he had heard many stories about spirits, often equating them with the wonder of magic. The man remarked that such thoughts were typical in rural areas. While Dion's answer wasn't quite what he had hoped for, he appreciated his way of speaking. Dion, slightly confused, asked what he meant. The man dismissed the question, saying everyone had their own story and it wasn't important. He then began to explain the basics of spiritism, but first, he asked if Dion knew anything about spirits. Later, back in his room, Dion reflected on everything he had learned. He thought about how the spirit god had created spirits to manage and sustain the world. Without spirits, the world couldn't function. Spirits were friendly beings, but their power differed from divine power, meaning the two didn't mix. This also meant that once someone was aligned with a certain attribute, they couldn't tap into other forces. If someone tried to overuse power, it could cause a violent explosion. As McGarden had said, everything originated from mana. Mana was essential for converting energy into either magical or elemental power. Dion remembered hearing that spirit mages were considered extremely valuable. He also recalled that being a spirit mage required being naturally sociable. The more affinity someone had with others, the more likely they could form bonds with spirits. Dion wondered if he too had this affinity. After all, without it, he wouldn't be able to see spirits in the first place. He also remained curious about the sudden decline in spirit numbers. Just then, a new spirit appeared before him. It had light brown hair, unlike any spirit he had seen before. Judging by its appearance, Dion assumed it could be an earth spirit, but he wasn't sure yet. His mind felt heavy with thoughts, so he decided to stop thinking for the night. Feeling exhausted, he bid the spirits farewell and went to sleep. The next morning, while riding in the carriage, Dion reflected on everything. Since that day, his concerns about mana had only grown. He had felt divine power, and he had also felt magical power. Yet something told him that this was only the beginning. If he wanted to become an elementalist, he would need to gather and harness that energy. Inside the carriage, passengers began chatting among themselves. One of them looked at Dion and expressed gratitude, acknowledging that Dion had saved his life multiple times. Dion replied with humble thanks. Just then, the carriage driver called out to everyone, announcing that they had arrived at their destination, Holton. At the entrance of Holton, a soldier addressed the arrivals, requesting everyone to show their identification. Dion stepped forward and showed the mark on his hand, identifying himself as Dion, the traveler. The soldier welcomed him, noting that this was his first registration. He instructed those planning to stay in the city to re-register their identities. As the mark on Dion's hand began to fade, he realized the contract had ended upon his arrival in Holton. The soldier signaled for the gate to be opened. Around Dion, other passengers began saying their farewells. Dion reflected on his own plans. Before leaving the village, he had received a letter of introduction from a merchant. With this in mind, he stepped out of the carriage. The carriage driver asked if he was heading off already. Dion replied that he didn't carry much luggage and expressed his gratitude for the journey. His eyes then caught sight of Linen standing nearby. She looked back at him, but without saying anything, Dion turned and walked away. Later, Dion arrived at a rented house. He observed a bird named Torox roaming the yard. Based on its appearance, it seemed like a cross between a duck and a chicken. It had a larger population than chickens and was edible. The house raised Torox for food, but there was one issue with this breed. It let out an irritating cry every morning at the same time. Dion found the sound unbearable and dreaded waking up to it daily. He realized something he hadn't noticed before. This world also had clocks. There existed a god of time, and even a church that worshipped that deity. He tried to recall the name, thinking it might be Penton. Another thing he had learned was that a full day in this world lasted 26 hours. It had already been over a month since he arrived in Holton. After finding housing, Dion began working as a housekeeper at a downtown bakery. It had been about 3 weeks since he started, and he was satisfied with his routine. One morning, while fetching water from a well, a spirit emerged from inside. Dion greeted it calmly and began filling his bucket. He noticed more spirits gathering around his feet and greeted them all. As he brushed his teeth, he realized his spirit sensitivity had increased. Now, he could see every spirit within a 20-meter radius. Planning the rest of his morning, Dion decided to boil some water. He reminded himself to collect more firewood and to check a few other things as well. Nearby, a group of spirits appeared, seemingly waiting for him. Dion apologized for being late and asked if they were trying to light a fire. Fortunately, the fire was still burning. He placed more firewood and asked the spirits to wait a moment, assuring them they'd have a strong fire soon. The spirits responded by igniting the flames, impressing Dion with their intense firepower. Feeling ready for the day, he started preparing the kitchen fire. Once satisfied, he asked the spirits to handle the rest. Thinking back, Dion remembered how he once couldn't understand the spirits. Back then, living with them had seemed completely normal. Holton was divided into 8 districts. The bakery named Baker was located in the Dongmun district. 3 weeks ago, he had been hired there as a new employee. Now arriving at the bakery, Dion greeted his boss, who instructed him to begin the day by checking the stock. Upon seeing Dion, the bakery boss found himself reflecting on the boy's presence. With aqua-colored hair and a mysterious aura, Dion didn't seem like an ordinary worker. It hadn't been long since the boss hired him, yet his appearance gave off the impression of a noble's son. When Dion first arrived claiming to be a wanderer, the boss was hesitant to accept him, even though he brought a letter of introduction. Hiring a wanderer felt risky. But at that moment, his daughter happened to walk in. Upon seeing Dion's face, she immediately recommended him. Faced with her strong suggestion, the boss had no choice but to give him a chance. He wasn't particularly pleased with his daughter's preferences, yet in hindsight, hiring Dion turned out to be a wise decision. Dion proved to be sincere and full of unique ideas. Contrary to all expectations, Dion's recipes had been exceptional. He introduced Soboro bread made with sugar, mocha bread using black beans, and other creations that had never been seen before, breads made with a mix of nuts, including chestnuts and pine nuts. Each one brought something new to the bakery. Thanks to Dion's contributions, the store's sales had increased by 30%. Back in the present, the boss asked Dion if the inventory check was complete. Dion confirmed it, reporting that there were 12 bags of flour in storage and 1 turret already in use. Satisfied, the boss noted that they had enough flour. Since the firewood delivery would take time and tomorrow was a holiday, he told Dion to leave early and rest. Dion confirmed, then thanked him and wished the boss a good weekend before heading out. As Dion left the bakery, he reflected on his recent days. He had been so busy that he hadn't found time to carry out his personal plans, but now he was finally free to do so. He looked ahead, spotting a large building visible even from the mall. Realizing he had overlooked it until now, he walked toward it with purpose. It was time to go in. Dion stepped inside and got hit by vibes like some dusty-ass old bookstore nobody gives a shit about. Quiet, creaky, and dead as hell. The warm scent of aged paper and wood filled the air. A man, presumably the owner, noticed Dion and welcomed him warmly. Dion responded with a polite greeting. The owner inquired about what Dion was searching for. Dion explained that he was looking for a book on elementals and spiritists. The man asked whether he wanted legendary stories or an introductory guide on becoming a spiritualist. Dion was shook by how straight-up blunt the dude was and couldn't tell if the bastard actually got what the hell he was asking. Choosing to be thorough, Dion requested to see all the related books so he could decide for himself. The owner agreed and asked Dion to follow him. As they walked through the rows of shelves, the man explained that every book in the store was precious. Magical books in particular were considered highly valuable. He added that the books were all used, and since spirits were such a rare profession, related material was hard to find, even in the capital. He did mention, however, that he had a decent collection despite those challenges. Dion was kinda impressed how shit was so damn organized, like this place wasn't a total dumpster fire. Soon, the owner returned with a stack of books and presented them to Dion, stating that these were all the titles they had related to spirits. Dion asked if he could open and check one, and the owner encouraged him to do so freely. Dion thanked him and began flipping through the texts. As he skimmed through one book, Dion realized it focused on legends, but he was looking for theoretical knowledge. His eyes then caught a smaller book with the title, Introduction of Spirits. It was a compact, handwritten volume that seemed perfect for carrying around. The content appeared to include foundational understanding and basic spiritism principles. There were no missing or damaged sections, which sealed Dion's decision. This would be his starting point. He planned to go through the details at home. The owner checked in, asking if Dion had made his selection. Dion confirmed and said he would take the book. As the owner examined it, Dion asked about the price. The owner reminded him that the books were used and difficult to manage and store, making them more expensive due to limited availability. Dion thought to himself that the man seemed quite skilled at what he did. He had a hunch that he might be returning here again in the future. The owner then offered the book to Dion for 40 silver. In his room, Dion quietly immersed himself in the book he had just purchased. As he read, he absorbed the information carefully. The text explained that spirits are beings born to manage the basic elements of the world. This concept, though ordinary, was similar to that of angels. Unlike living creatures, spirits were fundamentally different, and their numbers remained largely unknown. These beings were said to belong to the spirit gods. According to the book, spirit magic, also referred to as spiritual magic, was developed to subjugate these spirits and allow humans to harness their powers. The book's preface and the chapters that followed contained summarized knowledge about spiritual practices and the initiation rituals required to begin this path. Dion found the theory surprisingly digestible, though he couldn't help but wish the book went into greater depth. As described, developing spirit power began with collecting mana, a simple but vital requirement. Later, near the village well, Dion encountered a small fairy spirit. As he greeted it, he reflected on how interactions with spirits had become a daily habit. Though he could see them clearly now, he still couldn't hear their voices. He recalled the contract ritual from the book and thought that perhaps it would allow for true communication. He stretched out his hand toward the fairy and began the ritual. He spoke the ancient words of the contract, introducing himself as Dion and asking the spirit for its name in return. In response, the tiny fairy gently grabbed his finger. Dion smiled, realizing the connection had been made just as he expected. He paused, reflecting on what all this meant. Simply seeing spirits didn't make him special. Even though he had been reincarnated, it wasn't something grand or novel. It didn't make him superior. For a moment, he felt foolish for thinking it did. He recognized his own contradictions, understanding that humans were complex and often caught in such emotional swings. Suddenly, a strange sensation washed over him. Startled, Dion realized it felt similar to what he had experienced once before, but more intense. Everything around him fell silent. Then, unfamiliar scenes began to appear before his eyes. These weren't just images. They were vivid and alive. He quickly understood he wasn't just seeing visions. He was reliving memories, and these memories didn't belong to humans. They came from something entirely different. In that moment, a fireball materialized in his hand. Confused, Dion examined it briefly before it exploded, releasing a blast that filled the air with heat and force. He wondered if the fire had consumed him. if his body had turned to ash from a mistake in the ritual. But no, it wasn't punishment. He realized something deeper. Everything in nature, everything that formed the world, now felt intimately connected to him. He wasn't separate from them anymore. He had become one with the very elements that shaped existence. And with this transformation came a single question. What had he become now? Dion felt his body breaking apart once again. He wondered if he was going to disappear like this. Closing his eyes, he thought it was time to rest forever. Suddenly, his body began to regenerate, which startled him. A blue-haired fairy approached Dion and introduced herself as Undine, confirming his name. Dion acknowledged this and realized they could finally communicate. Undine explained that according to the contract of the elements, they were bound as one, sharing a soul until death. The scene ended with Dion lying on the ground, his eyes suddenly opening. Dion sat up, telling himself he did not want to go through that experience again. He admitted he had said the contract words out of curiosity, but never imagined the consequences. He understood it was entirely his fault, and this was no martial arts novel. Undine came closer and gestured for him to look at something. Dion wondered if the contract had truly taken effect, as he could now clearly hear the spirit's voice. Undine promised to stay with Dion from then on. Dion thanked her quietly. He sensed the presence of the small spirit connected to him, a feeling he had never experienced before. This, he realized, was what it meant to connect hearts. After some time, Dion mentioned they had plenty of flour in stock and decided to go eat something. Months had passed since Dion began living with Undine. This meant that his life in Holton, working part-time at the bakery, had also stretched on for quite some time. Undine spoke to him, and Dion affectionately placed his hand on her head, thinking how much she liked being patted. He took a break just to keep patting her gently. Dion then asked Undine a question. Perhaps because she was a spirit, he had never seen her eat anything. Undine responded that she could eat. Surprised, Dion asked if that was true. Undine said she liked spirit stones and found them delicious. Dion recalled reading about spirit stones in a book and heard they were very expensive. He admitted he wasn't sure if he even possessed spirit power yet. Usually spirits had the concept of being summoned, and since Undine had been summoned for about 26 hours, Dion wasn't certain. Since she said she could eat, he decided to try finding a spirit stone soon. Undine thanked him warmly. Soon, both of them headed outside. Dion noticed how happy Undine looked and commented on it. She agreed enthusiastically. Dion thought about getting a spirit stone from the wizard's shop, but was uncertain about the cost. The bakery's finances were not good, and money was running low after buying books at the bookstore. One particular book on understanding spiritism, the next step after the introductory course, cost 4 gold, a price too high to afford on a bakery salary. He knew he would have to find another way, although he was preparing several alternatives. Later, Undine held a bottle and asked Dion if it contained water. He confirmed it did and asked if she could do anything with water. She said yes. Using her power, Undine opened the bottle's cap and floated the water into the air, shaping it into a ball. Dion was amazed by the display. He thought the water looked very different from normal water. At that speed, being hit by it probably wouldn't cause harm. Feeling a little guilty for doubting Undine's usefulness, he devised an idea to use water to drown opponents. Meanwhile, he was still practicing how to throw daggers and had also gathered information about the surrounding terrain. Looking at a map, Dion wondered about the size of Holton compared to the capital and other domains. He shared that he had collected detailed information about wizards, aura masters, and priests. The reason he studied these differences was that he had always planned to leave Holton someday. As he walked along the road, people stared at him. Dion found it a bit unsettling. Although it was a remote area, it resembled a slum. According to the map, he was in the right place. He could hardly believe there was a mercenary guild nearby. He searched for its exact location. Suddenly voices came from nearby, shouting about a fight, a battle between mercenaries. One man yelled aggressively, cursing the enemies and threatening they wouldn't leave alive today. From inside a house, someone retorted, mocking them for fighting with words. The man outside challenged them to come out immediately. Another added that the challenger must be crazy. Yet another shouted in anger, demanding to know why they weren't coming out, warning that he would end their lives right then. Then, a man stepped out of the house and declared that mercenaries supported by Holton were assaulting and threatening civilians. These were not true mercenaries, but gangsters. He said he would leave if they wished, but warned them not to speak foolishly in public because it made them look pathetic. The man asked the mercenaries what they were going to do now. The mercenaries angrily told him that the area belonged to them and that a weakling like him had no right to speak. They warned he had messed with the wrong people. The man responded sharply, accusing them of ruining the district after harassing civilians. He asked if all they could do was keep fighting with words. Dion thought to himself that these weren't mercenaries at all. They were no different from common thugs. The mercenaries threatened to cut the man's head off and called to kill him. The man asked if they were ready to fight now. Dion couldn't believe what he was witnessing. The mercenaries were rough, but this behavior was excessive. Dion glanced at Undine, confused about what was happening. The mercenaries moved to attack the man. Dion watched as Undine began to rise upward. Meanwhile, the man blocked the mercenaries' attacks with his sword, taunting them by saying their standards were low. He noticed two more men approaching from behind. The mercenaries attacked him with their swords. Dion thought they were really going to kill him just for picking a fight. He wondered why it was wrong to stand against such injustice. It was cruel and unfair. The man punched one of the mercenaries in the face, but two others attacked him from behind. He had already expected this. Suddenly, a water attack struck the mercenaries directly. The man was startled and asked what had happened. Dion realized the attack wasn't magic, but likely Undine's doing. He was surprised by her power and felt oddly relieved in the situation. The man came over to Dion and asked if he was the one who had helped him. He guessed that the power belonged to a spirit and thanked Dion for the assistance. Dion replied that he had only done what was right. The man noticed Dion's expression and asked why he looked that way. Dion said it was nothing and that he had simply wanted to help, so there was no need to worry. Dion then questioned himself whether he really wanted to help and wondered why he felt relieved. The man apologized for the late introduction, saying his name was Encheon. He explained that he would be staying in Holton for a while and asked Dion to contact him through the Warriors mercenary group if anything went wrong. Dion thanked him. Encheon then left, warning Dion not to look at him like that next time as he walked away. After a short while, the scene shifts to Dion reflecting on his actions. He realized he had tried to save Encheon unconsciously and wondered if Undine had responded to his will. He thought about the powerful way water was used, recalling memories from a previous life where adding rotation to water pressure made it very destructive. He confirmed that Undine seemed to follow his will, and if that was true, many possibilities for future use opened up. He considered experimenting right away. Dion asked Undine if she was ready. Undine agreed and unleashed a water attack on a nearby rock, piercing a hole through it with a high-pressure stream. Dion praised her skill, placing his hand on her head and asking if she had any abilities related to healing or recovery. Undine replied that she was a water spirit who only knew how to use water. Dion thought about how water was often linked to healing and purification. He wondered if Undine was still immature or if healing depended on the spirit's will. He wished for more information since there were many unknowns. Remembering Ension's presence, Dion guessed that even wizards and priests might know about spirits' histories, and perhaps Ension knew more. After some time, Dion reached the mercenary guild. He noticed the poor hygiene and strong stench in the area. Undine used her purification skill, which made Dion happy. He thanked her, acknowledging that he might survive thanks to her help. Undine sought confirmation that she had done well, and Dion praised her purification ability as amazing. She playfully asked for more compliments, and Dion promised to give plenty once they got home. They decided to find Ension first. As they entered the guild, Dion sensed a fierce atmosphere. Suddenly, someone questioned him, asking if he had come in without knowing where he was. Dion told the man he was there to find someone. The man replied angrily, asking if Dion didn't hear him and whether he knew where he was. Dion answered that this was the mercenary guild and that he was looking for a mercenary named Ension. The man shouted in surprise, questioning the name Ension. Then, calming down a bit, he asked if Dion meant Ension. Dion confirmed it was the same person, a member of the Warriors Guild, and asked where he could be found. The man inquired if Dion knew Ension personally. Dion explained that Ension had told him to come find him the other day. The man recognized the Warriors mercenary and praised Dion's connections. He said Ension was located in the Queen's Tears Inn near the northern gate and offered to draw a map. Dion accepted the map and thanked the man. Then he gave him a coin in exchange. The man took the coin and remarked that Dion seemed knowledgeable. He introduced himself as Nohan and promised to welcome Dion warmly next time. Dion acknowledged and said he would remember the name. As Dion left, he thought about the wealthy people living in the northern area. He realized it would be difficult to use the Queen's Tears Inn without financial resources. He noted that the Warriors mercenaries had good skills and plenty of money. Later, Dion arrived at a place and wondered if it was a castle or an inn. He tried to enter, but the guards outside stopped him, saying no one could enter the place. Dion insisted he had come to see Encheon of the Warriors Mercenary Corps. The guards responded by questioning if Dion knew what kind of people the Warriors mercenaries were. Dion then used a magic spell with Undine's help. Seeing this, the guards were startled and asked if Dion was a spirit user. Dion confirmed it and requested they contact Encheon. The guards agreed and left. Dion reflected that sometimes using force was necessary, noting how human nature tends to feel helpless in the face of overwhelming power. Soon, a guard returned and invited Dion inside. The Warriors Mercenary Corps was explained as a small group of A-class mercenaries. Their reputation and the guild's endorsement spoke volumes. In reality, they were more like adventurers than mercenaries, though they also took mercenary work since their earnings were limited. Encheon asked Bendrit if he was sure about the clue. Bendrit confidently replied that the information came from the Brother of Darkness and mentioned spending a lot of money, jokingly asking if Encheon could guess the amount. Nearby, Intellidica, sitting with Bendrit, said that money didn't matter to them. Trustworthy information was far more important. He reminded everyone that they were adventurers first. Cylon chimed in, affirming that they were adventurers before mercenaries and questioned their worth. He suggested they settle matters by fighting rather than talking, and asked Harayan what she thought. Harayan replied that she simply followed Ension's will. Silon admitted fault for asking, and Harayan reiterated she was Ension's servant. Suddenly a man arrived to inform Ension that he had a visitor. Ension guessed it was the spirit user and asked for the guest to be brought in. Silon said he was finally meeting the man who boldly helped Ension. Intellidica added that encounters with spirit users were rare. He explained that water spirits were relatively weak, but Ension believed this one was at least intermediate level. He warned not to act rashly. At that moment, Dion arrived and greeted everyone. He explained that Ension had told him to come if he needed help, which was why he was there. Ension welcomed him, surprised by the early visit, and asked what he should call him. Dion introduced himself. Ension asked what he could do for him. Dion inquired if they knew anything about spirit users. He said he had signed a contract with the spirit of water, but didn't understand spirit magic or spells, despite having the water spirit beside him. He requested any insights they could offer. Silon laughed and called Dion a funny guy. He asked if Dion wanted to learn about spiritism to become stronger or to make a name for himself. Dion thought it strange being asked such a question but knew his answer, to find his identity and test his potential. Silon repeated, surprised, and Ension pondered the word identity, wondering if he had heard it before. Silon told Dion he was a lovely young man and that he would drop formalities since he was older. Dion agreed. Silon asked if Dion understood him. Dion replied yes and then asked for Silon's name. Silon introduced himself, joking about Dion's seriousness. Dion then asked if he could call him Silon Hyung, which Silon liked. He casually greeted everyone, dismissing formalities. Bendrit said fate left him no choice. Ension proposed getting down to business and asked if Dion wanted to learn about the spirit's history. Dion confirmed that was exactly why he came. Silon said that only the warriors could answer that question and wondered if their name had lost value. Bendrit disagreed. When asked what he meant, Bendrit said Dion was a unique guest and welcomed him warmly. Dion responded positively. Bendrit introduced himself with a dramatic flair. He called himself a friend of the moonlight and the leader of those who cherished the darkness. A wanderer in search of a peaceful sleep. His words were peculiar, poetic even, layered with mystery. Dion found his style grotesque and overly theatrical, yet something about his voice stood out. It had a richness, a charm that hinted at potential, perhaps even that of a singer. In contrast to his own past life, where he had never encountered people like this interaction felt new and unfamiliar. Bendrit then asked Dion where he was from. Dion sighed, silently wondering how he was supposed to handle someone so eccentric. Memories stirred as he tried recalling how he had dealt with similar people before. Perhaps the approach should be the same this time too. With a calm tone, Dion answered. He described the world he came from, a place where light faded and darkness took quiet steps forward. Compared to Bendrit's world, his was a small place, almost insignificant. Bendrit, sharing the same poetic rhythm, agreed. A quiet walk, he said, was his friend. He called himself a resident of the same world as Dion and claimed to be a piece of black darkness resting inside his heart. Then, grasping Dion's hand, he praised him for following his unusual words so well. Calling him talented and welcoming him warmly, Dion responded in kind, returning the greeting. At that moment, Telly appeared and interrupted their conversation. Her voice cut through the air, declaring that the joke had ended there. Bendrit looked at her and asked if it was already time for a shift. Telly responded, introducing herself formally as Intellect, but said it was all right to call her Telly. Dion thanked her, and she simply told him not to mention it. She turned toward Insirian, speaking with quiet firmness. She reminded him of a debt and declared that they were his friends and allies. Insirian, confused at first, eventually agreed, acknowledging their friendship. Telly offered to act in the spirit of that friendship. She turned to Dion and called him the young spirit man. Dion responded. Telly asked again what he wanted to know. She pressed him to clarify. Dion answered without hesitation. He wanted to know everything about spirits, specifically how to use spirit magic. Telly paused to think. It struck her that Dion was a complete beginner, yet he had already used intermediate spirit magic. She could sense the spirit's presence around him, even if he couldn't see it. She wanted to help him, but she knew it wouldn't be easy. Then she raised her hand and recited a magical chant. A door, hidden within the darkness, responded to her call. By the authority of its master, the door opened and began to guide them. From within, she retrieved a book and handed it to Dion. The book was titled Mother Nature of Spirit Magic. Dion was surprised she would give him something so valuable. Telly explained that it was the legacy of the magic once belonging to the City of Magic, a legacy now scattered. The book contained everything, including knowledge of intermediate-level spirits. Dion thanked her sincerely. Telly offered her blessing, hoping that Mana would guide him. Just then, Cylon arrived and placed a hand on Telly's shoulder. He reminded her not to forget about him. She promptly brushed his hand away, unamused. Cylon then turned to Dion, telling him that if anything ever happened, he should look for him. Cylon Hyung would take care of it. Dion, grateful once again, thanked him too. The moonlight lingered quietly overhead as the new bonds formed, guided by darkness, spirit, and the promise of magic yet to unfold. Dion sat quietly, absorbed in the pages of the book. It explained that a water spirit possessed 3 core abilities: attack, purification, and healing. Healing, it detailed, was meant for recovering wounds. Unlike purification, it required the creation of healing water. The text noted that healing water also offered partial purification. If consumed, it could not only heal wounds, but cure diseases simultaneously. Dion paused, intrigued. The detail surprised him. Curious, he turned to Undine and asked if he could truly perform such a feat. She confirmed that he could. Facing a small pool of water placed before him, Dion decided to test the spell. He recited the ancient mantra passed down through generations, invoking the name of Undine and calling forth water healing. As he spoke, the water shimmered and released a healing power. Both Dion and Undine smiled in awe. He had succeeded. To test its effects further, Dion made a small cut on his palm. Undine, startled, asked why he would inflict pain on himself. Dion reassured her, saying he intended to heal it with water healing. He channeled the magic, and the wound vanished instantly. Stunned by the results, Dion stared at his hand and exclaimed internally. The effect was outrageous. It felt like a potion, but one that also held purification power. He wondered if it was some kind of scam. Undine, equally shocked, dismissed the idea. Flipping through the book again, Dion discovered that, unlike potions, spirit-created water had an expiration date. Spirit magic didn't work through orders or commands. Instead, it operated on will. But still, nothing in the book mentioned anything about connecting minds. He questioned whether this ability had emerged from his reincarnation. If so, why had it taken 16 years to manifest? The thought felt absurd. Reincarnation wasn't supposed to be such a big deal, yet it felt bittersweet. Still, he was glad to have found it. He had been close to quitting his path, but now it was time to set new plans into motion. Later, Dion was seen conjuring shapes and forms using water magic, turning it into a spectacle. Onlookers gathered, mesmerized by the sight. Whispers spread among them. Some recognized him as Dion from the bakery. They wondered aloud whether he had always been a wizard. But something felt different. His magic didn't resemble typical spells. Someone suggested he might be a spirit user. The term spirit sage passed through the crowd, stirring more awe. They were amazed. Had Dion truly left the bakery behind? Dion noticed familiar faces in the crowd. With a subtle smile, he decided to take it further. He invoked the Song of Water. The liquid began to move gracefully, flowing like a melody through the air. The display stunned the crowd even more. Among them, a man narrowed his eyes. He muttered to himself, questioning if Dion was truly a spirit mage. He doubted a spirit sage could possibly exist in Holton. Then his eyes widened. He recognized the boy. It was Rick. He burst through the crowd and charged toward Dion, shouting that they had met at the Mercenary Guild. Out of breath, he declared that if Dion ever needed anything, he would be there. Dion calmly greeted him and addressed him as Nohan. Nohan, surprised, asked if Dion was really a spirit mage and what he was doing in the area. Dion explained he was selling the water of life and offered Nohan a sample. Nohan scoffed, calling it nonsense. As a lifelong mercenary, he had never heard of anything called the water of life. Dion insisted. Healing, he said, was the basic ability of a water elementalist. Nohan studied the water, watching droplets shimmer in the air. He tried to reason. If it was magic, mana should continue being consumed. Was Dion truly a spirit user? The thought made him uneasy. Then he raised his voice, accusing Dion of learning tricks from Ensirian. He called it a scam. Dion countered that Nohan had never seen a true spirit user. Nohan admitted it was rare. Spirit mages were even harder to find than wizards, especially a kid like Dion. Dion observed Nohan's knowledge and thought he was surprisingly well informed for someone acting so skeptical. With a calm tone, Dion offered him a free trial. Today, he said, it was free for all guests. Nohan, still confused, repeated the word free in disbelief. He stared at the glowing water and muttered again, "What in the world was the water of life?" Nohan continued mocking Dion, repeating his earlier words about curing diseases and restoring strength. He scoffed at the claim that it could heal wounds and asked how anyone was expected to believe such a thing. Accusing Dion of lying in public, he called him out in front of the gathered crowd. Among the onlookers, whispers began. Some agreed with Nohan. Even the priests couldn't treat such diseases, they murmured. Besides, no potion ever had that strong an effect. Nohan then boldly announced to the crowd that he would drink the water himself and expose Dion's supposed lie. Dion, calm and composed, once again used his mana to produce a glass of healing water and offer it to Nohan. As Nohan looked at the cup, suspicion filled his mind. He wondered if this was just another trick. Dion noted that Nohan seemed to have drunk quite a bit earlier and assured him that the water would help him sober up. He reminded him that a demonstration was necessary to convince the people. Nohan observed Dion with doubt, questioning where such confidence came from. He wondered if this water could truly surpass the healing powers of the priests. Never before had he heard of water that could outperform potions. Dismissing the idea, he told himself it must be a child's bluff. Yet the thought lingered. This was supposed to be the water of life. With hesitation, he grabbed the cup and drank the water. At first, he felt nothing and assumed it was just normal water. He inwardly dismissed it, thinking it couldn't possibly be the miraculous water of life. At first, he tried to declare the whole thing a scam, but mid-sentence, his expression shifted. A wave of energy coursed through him. Confused and startled, he shouted as he felt an unexpected surge of vitality. The crowd noticed his change immediately. A blue light began to envelop his body. Overwhelmed, Nohan exclaimed that he felt completely refreshed. His insides felt comfortable. The alcohol from the previous night was vanishing, and a clean, invigorating feeling was spreading through him. His fatigue lifted completely. With excitement, he called out loudly, encouraging the crowd to believe what they saw. Behind him, two men approached Dion, expressing interest in buying the healing water. They asked about the price. Dion responded that it was usually 20 copper per glass, but since it was the first day, it was free. The moment people heard this, a rush began. Many came forward, eager to get their share of the miraculous water. Dion stood there, amazed at the sudden crowd. He thought to himself how incredible this was. He had always planned to leave Holton, but now, contrary to his original intent, the healing water's popularity was steadily growing with the changing season. As the day progressed, he continued to sell the healing water to a growing list of happy customers. People cheerfully accepted it. One remarked that their terrible headache disappeared after drinking it. Another shared that their fatigue vanished instantly. Dion credited it all to the spirit mage's power. Elsewhere, two more men arrived and began discussing the growing rumors. One of them acknowledged that the rumor appeared to be true. They speculated that even soldiers might be regular users of this water. Another wondered if Dion was truly a low-level spirit mage. The possibility that he could maintain this kind of spirit power usage for months was unbelievable. They discussed the toll such spirit magic would take on the user. It didn't seem possible unless he was an intermediate or even a high-level spirit mage. One of them suggested that Dion might be a genius spirit mage who had appeared out of nowhere. With suspicion in their voices, they concluded that they needed to report this to the Lord and decided to head back for now. Later, as the day ended, Dion packed up and prepared to go home. Speaking to Undine, he mentioned that he had worked hard again that day. Undine agreed warmly. Dion reflected on how the temple's treatment was unaffordable for most, while his healing water offered an alternative at a much lower cost. He acknowledged that he hadn't been troubled by the temple yet and felt relieved. Thanks to Undine, he had been earning money through the healing water. With that money, he planned to buy Undine a spirit stone. Hearing that, Undine smiled and praised him for being so thoughtful. Dion then suggested they go inside and rest. Alone with his thoughts, Dion recalled the book Telly had given him. It had made him reflect deeply. The book stated that only contracted spirits could communicate with each other, but he had been able to communicate with spirits other than Undine. This thought lingered in his mind as he arrived home. There, he found more fairies gathered. Undine, upset, told the other fairies to leave, reminding them that Dion was her contractor. The other fairies explained that they had come casually with no ill intent. Dion gently intervened, asking Undine to calm down. While it was true that he was her contractor, there was no need to fight with friends. Undine realized her mistake and apologized. The purple-haired fairy also apologized in return, accepting Dion's role and assuring Undine that she didn't need to be sorry. Watching this exchange, Dion felt something unusual. It was the first time he had seen such a case. He admitted it was true that he and Undine didn't have a typical contractor relationship. Usually, spirit contracts didn't work this way. The behavior he was witnessing didn't match what he had read in the books. He wondered if this was Undine's jealousy. Deciding to be mindful of her feelings, he planned to adjust to her mood the next day and buy the spirit stone as intended. The next day, Dion once again headed out to sell his healing water. He told Undine they had somewhere to go together and hinted she would find out upon arrival. Curious, Undine asked where they were going. As they walked, a woman called out to Dion, addressing him as the Saint of Water. Dion paused, surprised at the title she used. The woman approached and told him she only needed a moment. She introduced herself as Mrs. Allerton and handed him a small box. She explained it was a return gift, a token of gratitude because Dion had once treated her children. After she left, Dion turned to Undine and quietly repeated the title, Saint of Water. It was such a grand name that he wasn't sure it suited him. Dion mentioned that they had said it was the wizard's shop. Undine appeared confused and asked about the wizard. Dion explained that he had heard this man was the best wizard in Horton, someone capable of performing magical combinations on his own. He added that he had once witnessed such a magic combination. At that time, 3 people were involved, and it was the first time he had seen magic like that. He had been truly impressed by the coordination and power behind the combination. They soon arrived at their destination. Dion pointed out that they were there, right in front of the shop. As he stepped inside, he was taken aback. The atmosphere was quite different from what he had imagined. As expected, the place was filled with all kinds of magical ingredients and tools. It reminded him of a department store, vast and full of wonder. Spotting someone nearby, Dion approached and greeted him, asking if he was Zoid the wizard. The man turned and welcomed him warmly. Recognizing Dion as the Saint of Water, he expressed his surprise and excitement. He said he couldn't believe a celebrity like Dion was actually there. Delighted by the coincidence, he added that he had always wanted to meet him. Since he was older, he suggested Dion call him Seiden Hyung, if Dion was okay with that. Dion hesitated for a moment, murmuring to himself, then asked about the name. He wanted to clarify if the man's name wasn't Zoid but actually Seiden. Seiden explained that the master, Zoid, wasn't around at the moment. He had gone to the capital, Holton, for some work. He asked Dion if he had come because he needed something. Dion confirmed he was there to buy a spirit stone. Hearing this, Sidon perked up. He said he had heard that the saint was a spirit mage, and that Dion had come to the right place if he was looking for spirit stones. Dion's eyes lit up at the confirmation, realizing that meant they did have spirit stones available. Sidon paused for a second before continuing. He admitted it had been a long time since he last heard about a spirit mage. It wasn't something people usually came asking for. Moreover, spirit stones were quite expensive, but he figured a spirit mage like Dion would already know that. He then showed Dion a variety of spirit stones. Dion's gaze swept across them, and he noticed one in particular. He thought to himself that even water spirit stones were there, but then his attention was caught by a unique one, black and white in color. Curious, he asked Sidon about it. Sidon chuckled and explained that it was the spirit stone of light and darkness. But then, lowering his voice, he told Dion to pretend he hadn't seen it. The price wasn't fixed and he wasn't supposed to sell it. His teacher had told him not to sell it even if a buyer came. Understanding this situation, Dion nodded and expressed his interest in buying a water spirit stone instead. He asked how much they cost. Sidon responded that the prices of spirit stones depended on their size, but water spirit stones typically sold for 100 gold. Dion wasn't surprised. As expected, they were expensive. Sidon confirmed there was no room for bargaining. That was simply how difficult they were to obtain. Most spirit stones were either harvested from or created by spirits themselves. According to Master Zoid, their numbers had significantly decreased in recent years, making them all the more precious. Dion reflected on that. He remembered hearing something similar once before, though he hadn't thought much of it at the time. But now, the truth of it sank in. Even Undine didn't seem to fully understand the matter. Despite everything, Dion made his decision. He said he would buy the water spirit stone. Dion decided he would look into the finer details later and handed over 100 gold coins to Zoid. Zoid seemed surprised, asking if Dion was really carrying all those coins with him. Dion explained that it was simply the safest way to do it. Hearing this, Zoid became excited and said he had another item to recommend. He brought up a handmade product created by his teacher, crafted from pure gold. Dion was intrigued by the idea of another recommendation and asked about the gold pocket. Zoid explained that, in simple terms, it was a magic bag. It could hold up to 5,000 gold coins, and users could take them out as needed. However, only gold coins could be stored in it, no other currency. Dion was amazed. The idea of carrying 5,000 gold coins in a single item was impressive. Zoid encouraged Dion to buy it immediately, promising that the owner would enchant it with magic, and he himself would add an anti-theft spell. Dion thought to himself that it felt like a 2-for-1 deal. The atmosphere reminded him of a place he had visited before, a shopping mall called the Dragon. It was surreal for him to be in a similar situation again. Regardless of where he lived, it was still astonishing. Dion asked about the price. Zoid hesitated, thinking about the opportunity. He realized that if he got close to a spirit mage, it could be his chance to earn favor in front of his master. But selling it for just 50 gold might get him into trouble. Conflicted, he admitted to himself that he didn't know what to do. After a moment of internal debate, Zoid finally told Dion the price. 50 gold. Dion was surprised. It was cheaper than he had expected. Zoid tried to play it off, convincing himself that he had already said the price, so it would be fine. Later, Dion returned home. Smiling, he told Undine that they had done quite a bit of shopping today. As they entered, the other fairies saw them and lit up with joy. Dion took out the water spirit stone he had purchased and handed it to Undine. He told her she had been waiting all day, and he hadn't been able to give it to her straight from the shop. In his heart, Dion admitted that he wanted to see Undine happy. He was also curious about how spirits grew and evolved. Undine, overjoyed, jumped in excitement. She called it a really expensive gift and thanked Dion, saying it was a present, a special one. Dion had given her a present. The other fairies looked on and commented that Undine was lucky. A present? They asked in cheerful amazement. Undine, overwhelmed with joy, declared that she loved Dion so much. Dion responded with equal affection, saying he loved her too and was always happy to have met her. Undine told Dion that she could feel his heart. She could sense that he was truly happy whenever they were together. Suddenly, a glowing aura began to emerge from Undine's body. Dion watched in awe. It felt strangely familiar. It reminded him of the time when she used to reveal secrets and truths about the world. But this time, something was different. Dion realized that he had to protect Undine. He had to save her. In the next moment, Undine lost consciousness. Her body radiated a powerful energetic aura, leaving Dion stunned and concerned. The strange phenomenon had disappeared, and Dion quietly acknowledged its end. As Undine slowly opened her eyes, Dion expressed relief, having feared something serious was about to happen. Undine, now more composed, credited Dion for helping her grow a little taller. Dion, unsure if she actually grew, noticed her improved speech and figured that was enough progress for now. Holding her gently, Dion admitted that he liked her just the way she was and encouraged her not to rush her growth. Undine warmly agreed, expressing her affection in return, saying this much was enough for now. Elsewhere, people gathered around Dion, drinking the healing water he provided. Dion observed how the day began with the crowd relying on it. Its popularity had soared so high that he now needed to hire help. With increasing demand, he began producing bottled versions and expanded its supply. Word had already spread across the territory, and now, the growing pile of money from sales had become a new kind of burden. While he pondered this, Undine called out to him. When he responded, she showed him a book she had finished reading. She admitted it wasn't very enjoyable since she already understood much of the content, and asked if there were other books to read. Dion informed her he didn't have any more for now but promised to buy some the next day. She accepted this with a grateful nod. Looking at her closely, Dion reflected on the noticeable changes in Undine since her growth. Her speech had become more refined, and she had learned to read, write, and remember things flawlessly. Her memory was exceptional. Anything she saw once was never forgotten. Unlike humans, spirits didn't seem to rely on their brains for memory. Instead, it likely involved consuming spirit stones. Dion wondered what would happen if Undine evolved into a higher-level spirit. Even mid-level spirit mages were rare enough to earn noble titles like Baron, which made her potential even more remarkable. He considered that others must have realized the same, meaning the growth of a spirit was likely an extremely challenging process. Right now, it felt manageable, but eventually, it could demand a massive quantity of spirit stones. Choosing not to worry about the future, Dion decided it would be best to keep business light for the day. At that moment, a group of soldiers arrived and began instructing people to clear the path and move aside. The sudden commotion drew attention, and one man reacted with frustration, questioning the soldiers. But when confronted, he quickly backtracked, visibly nervous. A knight approached on horseback, stopping before Dion and identifying him as the spirit mage. Dion confirmed his identity, and the knight announced that the Lord had summoned him. Though Dion complied, he couldn't help but notice the knight's arrogant and overbearing attitude. It was the typical behavior of those who wielded power, expecting obedience and looking down on others. Usually people reacted to such authority with fear or resentment. Even now, the nearby soldiers avoided Dion's gaze, seemingly uneasy in his presence. Dion recognized that the mere existence of spirit mages might be a threat to many. He noted the subtle fear mixed with formality, something common among mercenary guilds too. Despite all this, he didn't feel much emotion himself. The situation was strange and unwelcoming, and he didn't like the atmosphere surrounding it. Without further hesitation, Dion agreed to follow. As they left, the knight quietly evaluated him. He noted Dion's calm composure, recognizing that while he wasn't intimidated, he wasn't being disrespectful either. Whether Dion was truly a spirit mage or not remained to be seen, but soon that truth would be revealed before the Lord. As Dion approached the castle, he was struck by its immense scale. In his previous life, he had never seen a structure of such grandeur. The thought crossed his mind. Could a self-made man ever live in a place like this? The idea felt astonishing, but he quickly shook it off. This wasn't the moment to indulge in wonder. He had already attracted their attention, and that was the bigger concern. Their intentions were too blatant to ignore. The knight instructed him to follow, and Dion complied silently. They made their way through the grand corridors of the castle until they arrived at Lord Holton's office. Upon entering, Dion immediately noticed the vibrant interior. The room exuded power and taste, making him wonder if the title associated with this office should be reconsidered. Inside, Lord Holton asked the knight if he had brought the guest. The knight confirmed, introducing Dion as the rumored elementalist. Lord Holton offered a formal welcome, maintaining an authoritative yet measured demeanor. Dion observed the man closely. His solid, powerful build suggested a background rooted more in military leadership than political maneuvering. The aura he gave off was disciplined and formidable. As Dion remained still, the knight nervously turned to him, startled by his calmness. Dion stepped forward and introduced himself, directly asking the reason for his summons. The knight's expression instantly changed. He was shocked by Dion's lack of formality. Internally, he burned with frustration, labeling Dion as arrogant and disrespectful for speaking so casually in front of a noble. But before the knight could react further, his eyes widened in disbelief. Around Dion's body, droplets of water had begun to float and swirl, forming a light, shimmering aura. The water droplets floating around Dion suddenly transformed into sharp spears, catching the knight completely off guard. The sudden shift in mana density heightened the tension in the room. Lord Holton immediately ordered a stop, and the knight obeyed without hesitation. Holton, composed yet firm, addressed Dion, recognizing him as an intermediate spirit mage. He introduced himself as Bearing Dionia Holton. Just then, Undine whispered to Dion, acknowledging the strength radiating from Holton. Dion assessed the situation, sensing a strange distortion in reality. Holton's presence created an overwhelming pressure that blurred the line between illusion and reality. Though it was his first encounter with such power, Dion knew it would be dangerous to engage carelessly. Holton, moving straight to the point, made his proposal, offering wealth and honor in exchange for Dion's loyalty as a vassal. Dion immediately recognized the typical structure of the offer. It was simple but expected. Responding calmly, Dion explained that he was traveling the world to test his own potential. For that reason, he needed to remain free. Becoming Holton's vassal would restrict the very freedom that allowed him to grow. He questioned what new possibilities would be left if he gave that up. Holton's expression shifted with irritation, but he remained composed. He asked if Dion was truly refusing his offer. Dion confirmed, rejecting it without hesitation. Holton reminded him that such a refusal was an insult. Dion, unfazed, countered by asking if Holton understood the weight of his life. Holton replied that his own proposal carried greater weight. Dion reflected on the deep-rooted sense of entitlement within the nobility. It hadn't changed even in this world. He calmly disagreed. Holton, now provoked, warned him to reconsider. Yet internally he was puzzled. Dion didn't react to the intimidation like most did. With frustration building, Holton shouted at his knight to seize Dion. The knight surged forward with fury, shouting as he prepared to strike. But before he could reach, Undine reacted instantly. A wave of water blasted the knight backward, halting the attack. Dion, surprised by the swift defense, questioned if the knight truly intended to strike him again. Holton, stunned, began to doubt the water spirit's strength. Undine's resolve deepened. She declared her intent to protect Dion and vowed never to forgive those who tried to harm him. Dion noted how he hadn't even needed to move. Undine had defended him flawlessly. This silent coordination between them grew more evident. Holton, now enraged, drew his sword. He condemned Dion for scorning nobles and assaulting a knight. He accused him of being talented, yet uncontrollable. Dion's focus shifted instantly to the sword, an aura blade. He had only heard of such weapons, and now he was facing one. Holton dismissed Dion's tricks as useless unless controlled by someone like himself. Without further warning, he lunged at Dion with his sword, intent on ending the conflict then and there. But Undine reacted again, forming a shield of water just in time to block the deadly strike. Holton stepped back, acknowledging the impressive response. He questioned whether that was truly Dion's power or that of the spirit itself. Undine turned to Dion urgently. Her voice was sharp with concern. The enemy wasn't bluffing. This time, he was truly aiming to kill. Dion sensed something unusual. He could clearly read Viscount Holton's movements. This heightened awareness seemed to come from his connection with Undine. Although Holton was undeniably powerful, Dion felt confident. He believed that there was a path to victory even in this dangerous situation. The water barrier would soon collapse, and Holton's arrogance in his own strength could be used against him. Dion urged Undine, through thought alone, to understand his strategy. She received his thoughts and prepared to act as planned. Holton observed the weakening barrier and remarked on its impending failure. Just as expected, the wall of water shattered under pressure. At that exact moment, Dion gave Undine the signal. Undine launched her attack without hesitation. The sudden burst of water magic struck Holton, forcing him backward. Though an expert swordsman, he was overwhelmed by the raw force of a spirit mage. He stumbled and crashed onto the table behind him. Dion watched the scene unfold and reflected on the cause of Holton's defeat. It wasn't about strength or weakness. Holton lost because of his noble pride, an aristocrat too blinded by status to see others as equals. Without understanding that truth, he was bound to face defeat again. After the confrontation, Dion turned to Undine and asked if she could heal them both. She agreed and began healing Holton. Once Holton was stabilized, Dion addressed him directly. He expressed his inability to accept the proposal. It wasn't out of disrespect, but a matter of personal conviction. Dion desired freedom, true freedom. He couldn't live bound by someone who didn't understand that need. With his decision made, Dion turned and began to walk away from the estate. But as he exited the castle grounds, a man appeared with a group of soldiers blocking his path. Dion responded calmly, pointing out that it was the Bolton who had tried to imprison and harm him without cause. The man refused to listen and accused Dion of arrogance, of believing too much in his own strength and speaking too freely for someone in his position. But Dion stood firm. He questioned their reliance on coercion and reminded them that he had only come because he was summoned. He had declined the offer peacefully and was attacked without justification. Bolton's name was brought up again, with the man claiming that Dion's actions were a direct insult to the Holton family's authority and a mockery of aristocratic order. Dion reflected inwardly. He realized that nobles and knights operated on their own brand of logic, one shaped by emotion and entitlement. Their judgment lacked balance, clinging to power without reason. What felt natural to them could be wildly distorted from another's point of view. Undine, sensing rising hostility, activated her water power once more. The tension escalated immediately. The man declared there was no need to wait, commanding his soldiers to kill Dion. As he and two others charged forward, Dion reacted swiftly. Using his water skill, he blocked their attacks and hurled the lead attacker away with sheer force. The remaining two rushed in with swords drawn, but Dion's water shield absorbed their strikes with precision. With a single surge of energy, he knocked both of them backward, disarming their momentum. Witnessing the defeat of their comrades, the rest of the soldiers froze. Shocked by Dion's strength, they chose not to move. Without another word, Dion walked away, leaving behind a silent courtyard and stunned soldiers who could only watch as he vanished into the distance. Dion was seen riding a carriage, lost in thought. After the incident with Holton, he had packed up and left without hesitation. As the distance grew between him and Holton, memories resurfaced. He wondered why Viscount Holton had tried to force him. Was it arrogance born from being stronger and wealthier? Or had Holton simply assumed Dion wouldn't refuse, expecting unconditional obedience due to his noble status? Dion questioned whether his response had been inappropriate. But deep down, he knew that had he agreed, he would have been trapped. It was all in the past now, and there was no point dwelling on it. Glancing beside him, Dion noticed Undine seemed to be in a cheerful mood. Looking ahead, Dion realized they had arrived near Gel's castle. Undine was quick to point out how much bigger it was compared to Holton's estate. Dion acknowledged that, noting it belonged to a countess. Still, he had no plans to stay long. Undine asked why, and Dion explained he didn't want a repeat of the last incident. He planned to leave again once his current objective was complete. As they approached a wall adorned with a distinct emblem, Dion identified it as the symbol of the Mercenary Guild. Undine remarked how different it felt from Holton. Dion agreed, impressed by the well-maintained building, and thought they shouldn't judge all nobles based on Holton alone. Upon entering, Dion noticed the clean and refined interior. It was far superior to what he'd seen before. There were various requests posted, yet the atmosphere was quieter than expected. A young woman welcomed him warmly, introducing the place as Gel's Mercenary Guild and asking how she could assist. Dion informed her that he had come to register as a mercenary. She asked if he planned to only use it as an identification, or if he would actively work as a mercenary. Dion replied that he intended to take on missions. The girl explained that beginners usually started at Class D and would receive certification after completing a request. She then asked about his skills. Dion shared that he was a low-level spirit mage. Upon hearing this, the girl was surprised and apologized, not realizing he was a spirit mage. She explained that spirit mages were categorized as Class B by default but needed to complete a request before official registration. She offered him a list to choose from. Dion agreed and began scanning the options. He found one that seemed manageable and accepted it. The next scene showed Dion engaged in battle with goblins, using Undine's support. The request required him to collect at least 10 goblin teeth as proof of the hunt. Contrary to the guide's earlier concerns, the mission turned out to be quite easy. To Dion, goblins posed no real threat. In fact, compared to humans, they seemed simpler, driven purely by instinct. As he fought, Dion found himself questioning the morality behind it. Should he kill creatures simply because they were harmful to humans? Did possessing power mean he was obligated to protect strangers? The thoughts felt selfish and strange, yet they lingered. Once the battle seemed complete, Dion asked Undine to heal the goblins and send them back. She agreed, and he thanked her. After defeating them, Dion confirmed that the task was complete. Undine nodded in agreement, but before they could relax, both suddenly sensed something unusual. Their eyes turned upward, alert and focused on whatever was approaching from above. Suddenly, a stone came flying toward Dion and Undine, landing with a heavy thud beside them. Undine, startled, pointed out that the attack had come from the direction of their carriage. Dion quickly responded, and the two rushed back in that direction. Fortunately, the carriage remained unharmed. Relieved, they agreed it was time to leave. But just as they prepared to move, a massive figure appeared before them. A giant creature towered ahead, its forehead marked with a glowing jewel. Dion immediately recognized it as an elder ogre, a monster he had only read about in books. According to the guild's information, such a creature wasn't supposed to be in this area. Undine, filled with anxiety, noted that this was no time for analysis. The ogre was approaching. Dion observed its movements, suspecting that it wasn't targeting them specifically. Then, with a deafening roar, the giant bellowed across the landscape. Dion's attention shifted to a figure engaged in battle with the monster. It was someone familiar, in Syrian. The warrior dodged the ogre's fierce strike, quickly turned around to face the beast, bent down, activated his eyes' abilities, and jumped at the monster. Dion was amazed at his speed and agility, far beyond anything he'd seen, even from Viscount Holton. Leaping high, Syrian slashed at the ogre with his sword and challenged the creature's resilience. At the same moment, a water-based attack struck the ogre with great force. Undine had joined the fight. Dion acknowledged the strength of the spirit's attack, wondering where they had seen Syrian before. Syrian, now closer, warned them that the attack wouldn't be enough and urged Dion to escape. Dion, recognizing him clearly now, confirmed that it was indeed Syrian. He thought to himself that they had already been discovered. The warrior had delivered a powerful blow to draw attention. Dion could have run, but he chose instead to trust Syrian, believing it might be safe to stay. He assured Syrian that everything was fine. Surprised, Syrian asked how Dion knew his name. Upon closer inspection, he realized it truly was Dion. Dion responded calmly, saying they could talk later. With a signal from Dion, Undine began launching multiple water balls around the ogre's face. The coordinated attack gradually enveloped the monster's head in a massive sphere of water. Watching this, Syrian wondered what Dion truly was. Dion then told Undine to stop. As she ceased her attack, the ogre turned to face them. Dion stared into the creature's eyes, sensing something unfamiliar. He questioned internally whether there was a deeper reason behind the ogre's appearance. Syrian cautioned that the creature remained dangerous and was still alive. Dion asked whether killing it was necessary and advised Syrian to step aside. Moving forward, Dion approached the massive beast. Up close it looked even larger, but the earlier ferocity had faded. Examining the creature's wounds, Dion noted that they weren't too deep. He asked Undine to prepare healing water. She agreed and began using her powers to treat the ogre. Dion then asked the monster if it could return to where it came from. He wondered why he had said that, knowing the ogre likely wouldn't understand. Still, he felt compelled to speak. As he repeated the question, he began to suspect the creature might be understanding him after all. Undine looked toward the giant and began to speak gently, reminding it that a divine presence was watching. She sensed the creature already understood this truth and asked if there was a reason behind its actions, urging it to share that reason if possible. Dion quietly observed her and thought to himself that it was Undine who could communicate this way. He didn't believe he possessed such an ability. Suddenly, something strange happened to him. A shift in perception struck him unexpectedly. Dion felt disoriented and questioned if it was happening again. He tried to calm himself, unsure of what was coming next. For a moment, it felt as if time itself had stopped. To his surprise, the scene shifted. The giant was no longer standing. It was seated now. At that moment, a wave of memories from the giant began flowing into Dion's mind. As visions played out, Dion realized the truth. A treasure once left behind by a fragmented soul had been taken by Insirian. Now Dion found himself silently asking, what judgment was he meant to deliver here? Undine's voice broke through the thoughts, calmly expressing her trust in Dion's decision. Insirian approached him and asked if he was all right. Dion nodded, then brought up the treasure. Insirian tried to dismiss the conversation, claiming he didn't understand, but Dion remained firm. He clarified. He was talking about the treasure of the Elder Ogre. Hearing this, Insirian turned his face away, revealing hesitation. Dion pressed forward, saying he knew it had been stolen. Insirian asked how he could possibly know that. Dion calmly requested its return, stating that Insirian already knew it was the wrong thing to keep. Insirian remained silent for a moment, reflecting. He admitted that perhaps there were things he didn't understand. Then he handed over the treasure. Dion took it, thanked him sincerely, and turned back toward the giant. Without hesitation, Dion returned the treasure to the Elder Ogre. The creature accepted it without resistance. With calm resolve, Dion asked it to return now, to the forest, to its nest. Insirian stood nearby and softly repeated those last words. Yes, it was a nest. With that, the Elder Ogre turned and slowly departed, disappearing back into the wilderness. Dion walked up to Insirian and reintroduced himself with a calm tone, acknowledging the long time that had passed. Insirian responded, recognizing Dion as the spirit mage and noting how much he had changed. As night settled in, the two of them sat beside a fire, quietly sharing words under the starlit sky. Dion remarked on Insirian's earlier actions, pointing out the danger involved. He acknowledged there must have been a reason but noted the difficulty of succeeding in such a case, implying Insirian may not have been fully aware of the risks. Insirian responded with a defensive tone, questioning whether he was being blamed. Dion clarified that it was meant as advice, not criticism, though it might sound like the latter. He warned that greater caution was needed in the future. Insirian explained that the treasure had been necessary for their cause. Dion reminded him that it also belonged to the Elder Ogre and questioned what it would mean if they took something hard to obtain, only to find it wasn't truly needed. Insirian asked if Dion held respect for monsters. Dion responded that all living beings deserved respect. He added that if no harm was involved, he preferred not to fight, believing every being had its reasons. Insirian replied that he too had his reasons for needing the treasure. Dion admitted he didn't know the treasure's purpose and agreed his thoughts were personal opinions. Still, he had tried to help Insirian today and wondered aloud if his actions were seen as interference. Insirian challenged him further, asking if Dion would still remain unaffected even if the treasure were stolen again. Dion confirmed that he couldn't stop him either way. Insirian found this perspective odd and asked if Dion was an elf. Dion clarified that he was human. Insirian remarked that his thinking resembled an elf's more than a human's, but then noted that even elves were passive and mechanical. Dion responded that his views might seem strange, but humans had the freedom to be anything. As the night deepened, he offered Insirian a place to stay. Though grateful, Insirian declined, explaining that his comrades would soon be looking for him. Dion then offered to treat his visible wounds. Insirian tried to brush it off, saying he was fine and planned to leave before it got too late. However, his condition worsened. His head spun, and he collapsed to the ground, still insisting he was fine. Dion caught him and pointed out he clearly wasn't. Insirian sighed, acknowledging that he hadn't expected to owe Dion again. Dion signaled to Undine, who immediately responded. She used her abilities to begin healing. Dion told Insirian to rest for now. Watching him, Insirian thought to himself that Dion truly was a strange and mysterious individual. Elsewhere, Insirian's comrades were already searching. They ran through the forest, urgency on their faces. Bendrit blamed himself, thinking their situation was the result of his actions. Ceylon stopped him, reminding him of the promise they all shared. Suddenly, Telly called out, urging everyone to wait. Heiron spoke up next, announcing that she had found something. She believed Insirian was nearby. The group immediately began scanning the area around them, prepared for whatever came next. Just then, Telly pointed ahead, alerting everyone to the sight of a carriage. Bendrit, surprised, questioned why a carriage would be on a mountain like this. Ceylon chuckled. wondering if it could be someone they knew, but Bendrit admitted he wasn't sure. Without hesitation, Cylon suggested they move forward, and the group began heading toward the carriage. As they walked, Bendrit found it odd. This area was dangerous, yet someone had brought a carriage here. Telly observed the surrounding signs and confidently guessed it was Ensyrion's doing. She believed he must have fought the Elder Ogre. Suddenly, Bendrit spotted Ensyrion. The moment their eyes met, Ensyrion acknowledged their presence. He said he had expected them and apologized for not meeting them earlier. Bendrit stepped forward and Ensyrion asked if he had anything to say. With regret, Bendrit apologized. He admitted that he had been completely deceived this time. Ensyrion asked him to explain further. Cylon clarified that the Elder Ogre's magic stones held no value for them. Bendrit added that it seemed like an informant had lured them into a trap. Telly explained that she had searched through ancient documents. Despite that, the information she found alongside the Elder Ogre's magic stone didn't mention any curse related to them. Ensyrion silently pondered her words, wondering if Dion had already known the truth. If so, he realized there was no longer any need to hold on to guilt. Ensyrion asked if they had identified who had set them up. Bendrit replied that they hadn't, but believed the culprit would be exposed once news spread about Ensyrion's battle with the Elder Ogre. Telly warned that enemies might come after them while they were still worn out from the fight, then turned to ask Ensyrion whether he had retrieved the stone. Ensyrion confirmed that he had secured the stone but had to return it due to the situation. Telly was shocked to hear this and asked if he truly fought and defeated the Elder Ogre. Ensyrion quietly affirmed that there had been a reason. Bendrit turned to Telly, reminding her that their captain's safety should come first. Annoyed, Telly silenced him and, with a playful scowl, struck him on the head. Bendrit, startled, turned to Cylon and exclaimed that Telly had hit him. Cylon responded teasingly, saying he would scold Telly once they got home. Telly, irritated, warned the others not to test her patience and began preparing another attack. Bendrit, now alarmed, realized he might have gone too far. Their lively banter and antics brought a smile to Dion's face. Watching them argue like before, Dion felt an overwhelming sense of relief. For the first time in a long while, he burst out laughing. Then, looking at the group, Dion greeted them warmly and asked how they had been. Cylon was startled when he saw Dion and confirmed that it really was him. The rest of the group quickly gathered, questioning why Dion was there. Dion explained that he had come on a request to obtain his mercenary certification. Bendrit approached and guessed that it must be through Jill's mercenary guild. Dion confirmed and then casually asked if they had eaten yet. The group admitted they hadn't had anything. Ensyrion sighed, acknowledging that he would be in Dion's debt once again. Dion assured them to wait just a moment and promised to prepare a meal quickly. Not long after, Telly reacted in disbelief. She pointed out that only an intermediate elemental mage could even hear the Elder Ogre's prayer. She emphasized that simply using water magic wasn't enough to block such a power. Maintaining that state was far more difficult than launching an attack. Cylon asked for clarification on what made it harder. Telly explained that while creating fire was easy, maintaining it for a long time using minimal power was nearly impossible unless one possessed the magic level of a Grand Mage. Hieron asked if this meant Dion was truly a Grand Mage-class elementalist. Telly admitted she wasn't sure yet and needed to look into it more. Still, she explained that to maintain an airborne attack with a spirit was like fighting while constantly losing blood. Ensyrion added that sustaining such strong magical power could lead to self-destruction, as it drained immense amounts of spirit energy. Telly agreed. Ensyrion thought to himself that Dion had remained completely calm after all of that. Not only did he not look exhausted, but he had even managed to heal him. At this point, Ensyrion considered it best to just ask Dion directly. Just then, Dion returned and announced that the food was ready. Bendrit was delighted by the smell and recognized it as stew. Dion confirmed it and asked them to understand, as it was the only food available. Everyone began eating. Bendrit commented with surprise at Dion's cooking skills, then remarked on how emotionless Dion seemed. He found it unusual that someone could appear both refined and carefree. Dion responded that if anyone was unique, it was Bendrit. Bendrit proudly stated that being a precious half-elf, his uniqueness was only natural. Dion found Bendrit amusing and thought he was like a cartoon character. Soon, Bendrit turned to Cylon and asked if Dion didn't look cute when he smiled. Cylon agreed, saying it was a good smile and even better because Dion could cook well. Dion looked around at his friends and thought that everything looked nice and beautiful all over again. Smiling, Dion commented that everyone there was very good looking. Telly, confused, asked what he meant. Dion clarified that they were all pretty and charming. Bendrit reacted with surprise and asked for confirmation. Had Dion just said everyone? Dion nodded. Bendrit teased further, questioning if Dion thought Telly was pretty. Dion turned to Undine and asked her opinion. Undine responded that while it was a bit strange, Telly was indeed pretty. Dion agreed, saying it matched his thoughts. If his eyes weren't deceiving him, then yes. Telly was truly beautiful. Ensyrion noted how one unbelievable event followed another. Telly admitted she never expected any of it to happen. Then Bendrit called everyone over, pointing out that Telly's magic might not be working. Insirian agreed, and Heron added that the situation was troublesome. Cylon turned to Telly, curious about her thoughts. Telly explained that when they first met Dion, he had seemed like a novice spirit mage. But after hearing what he had done to the Elder Ogre, she believed Dion possessed rare and special powers. Standing at a distance, Dion thought to himself that it felt like a secret only he shouldn't know. Still, their voices were loud enough for him to hear everything. He stepped in and admitted he hadn't meant to eavesdrop but wanted to join the conversation. He explained that his ability felt different from others. While everyone could see spirits, only a few could actually touch them. Telly was shocked to hear that Dion could touch a spirit, as ordinary humans couldn't even see them. Cylon asked whether it was really true that elementals couldn't touch spirits. Bendrit answered by simplifying it. He said affinity with spirits in nature was vital, and that such affinity wasn't decided by spirits themselves but by the spirit god, Lord Honoradeon. Elves could see and touch spirits due to the friendly relationship between their gods. However, high-level spirits could reveal themselves on their own, making them exceptions. Dion added that he had never once resummoned Undine. Telly found it hard to believe. Dion admitted he still lacked enough information to make a clear judgment. Telly then asked if she could look inside him to check things herself. Dion agreed and welcomed her help. Telly began chanting her mantra and prepared for the examination. She declared that she would test Dion's powers using her magic and would report anything unusual. Dion thanked her and hoped she could find something. He reassured Undine that everything would be fine. Once ready, Telly began her investigation. As she delved inside Dion's essence, she found a mysterious source but became confused. Although it appeared to be Dion, something didn't feel right. She moved closer but sensed an unknown force pushing back. It wasn't spirit power but something entirely different. Suddenly, she was repelled backward, stunned by the experience. Facing her companions, Telly apologized for not being able to go deeper. However, she did discover something important. Dion had no spirit power. Everyone reacted with shock. The idea that a spirit mage could have no spirit power left them speechless. Even Dion was more surprised than he had anticipated. Telly continued, explaining that despite the absence of spirit power, Dion and Undine had formed a contract. And Undine still appeared without the need for resummoning. Dion asked if she had figured out how this was possible, but Telly admitted that her ability wasn't enough to uncover that truth. Dion thanked her sincerely for the effort. Cylon and Bendrit began teasing them playfully. Insirian interrupted, asking them to stop, and turned to Dion to express his gratitude. He acknowledged Dion's help and assured him that the warriors now trusted him as a friend. If Dion ever needed help in the future, he should reach out. Bendrit echoed the sentiment and encouraged Dion to call him anytime. Cylon also joined in, telling him not to feel pressured. Dion thanked them and confirmed that he saw them as trusted friends. He promised to contact them if he ever needed support. As it was already late, he asked whether they had a place to sleep. Insirian said they would now need to find a place to camp. Bendrit joked that camping and wandering homeless was a phrase that took a month to say. Dion offered to prepare a tent, saying it would be better than camping outdoors. Insirian, realizing that everyone was exhausted and he still needed time to recover, accepted the offer. He acknowledged that pride wasn't important in such a situation. Once again, he turned to Dion and admitted he owed him a debt of gratitude. A little while later, Dion sat near the fire and asked Insirian if all the warriors were half-breeds. Insirian confirmed it. Dion admitted that he had thought everyone was simply special and hadn't considered the possibility of mixed heritage. He also hadn't known that Telly had vampire blood. Insirian explained that it was a result of past generations breaking taboos to gain power through countless wars. As a side effect, all mixed-race individuals carried a curse. Telly's curse in particular was extremely powerful and dangerous. Undine, sensing something unusual, realized that the strange feeling around Telly must have stemmed from this. Dion recalled something he had read in a book. The vampire power included a craving for blood, a seductive influence over both men and women, and the ability to intensify this charm through physical beauty. To avoid attracting others, the half-vampire Inteldric had sealed his powers with magic and even altered his face. Dion found it especially unusual that a Dedan monk he had once met had demonstrated this sealing magic and taught Telly how to control it. Despite that, Dion noted that the magic hadn't worked for him. Insirian responded that it wasn't just ordinary magic, it was the magic of a great mage. The fact that it failed on Dion was something no one could ignore, though he still couldn't figure out why. Changing the subject, Dion asked if Harayan was male. Insirian clarified that there seemed to be a big misunderstanding, but indeed, they were all men. Dion apologized for the rude question. Undine then asked Dion if he liked these people. Dion responded that it didn't feel bad since he shared similar feelings. Undine pointed out that each of them possessed strange powers, dark magic, divine favor, or beastly strength. All of them had artificial origins. She believed it would be better to keep some distance from them. Dion wondered if that was truly okay. He reasoned that contradictions like these were part of being human. Undine admitted she wasn't sure finding humans to be odd. Dion reminded her that he was human too. Undine acknowledged it but added that Dion was different. His presence felt vast and peaceful, like nature itself. That's why other spirits were drawn to him. Dion wondered silently whether they were the same kind of human but somehow different. He couldn't quite understand what Undine was trying to say. Then Insirian interrupted, asking if Dion was talking to a spirit. Dion confirmed it. Insirian had a question and asked if Dion could answer it, but before he could continue, Telly suddenly stepped out of the tent, alerting Insirian to an emergency. He was caught off guard. Telly informed him that some guests had arrived from afar. Insirian immediately understood who they were. Telly added that the group was closing in fast and following their trail would soon lead to direct contact. Dion asked what was happening. Insirian confirmed that it was the enemy. Dion was shocked and asked if he was sure. Insirian didn't hesitate. He explained that the attackers were infamous local bandits known as the Red Blades. The red smoke visible nearby was their signature sign. They had already clashed with them in the past. Bendrit activated his mana and summoned his weapon, preparing for the battle. The others followed suit, each getting into position ready for the fight ahead. Meanwhile, Harayan joined his hands in prayer, chanting softly in reverence to his god, Hadraward Nim. Dion watched silently, realizing that everyone was preparing for combat. Since the group had declared the intruders as enemies, there was no way to avoid confrontation. He wondered what Insirian would do as the leader, and thought about how he should react if a battle truly broke out. Cylon, standing close, questioned Dion's next move, reminding him how close the enemy had come. Bendrit turned to Insirian, asking if she was ready. Insirian's thoughts turned to Dion. She didn't want him, someone unrelated to their conflict, to get caught up in this. The best course of action, she believed, was to let Dion escape separately. Noticing her hesitation, Dion realized she wasn't making a quick decision. He understood then. She was trying to protect him. In that moment, he felt trust and genuine consideration from her. Dion responded with clarity. The terrain was too rough to escape easily, and they were already facing the enemy. Though dangerous, the entrance was narrow, which could be used to their advantage. Using the carriage as a base, they could launch a strong defense. Dion offered to help, adding that Undine's magic or his own spells could be effective if the enemy clustered near the entrance. Though he disliked fighting, he no longer wished to avoid it. These people were now his guests, and he couldn't allow anyone connected to him to be harmed. Dion's words impressed everyone. Then he asked if he could join them. Cylon replied immediately, welcoming his support. Bendrit smiled, eager to finally see Dion's true abilities. With that, the group declared their resolve. They would fight, and they would wipe the enemy out. Meanwhile, a Red Blade's scout spotted smoke rising from the forest and immediately deduced Insirian's location. The Red Blade's scout boss then shouted at his men to follow him. However, 3 of them was shot by Bendrit arrows. The Red Blade's scout boss announced not to stop and keep moving. He called out that Insirian was now like a rat in a trap and warned everyone to be prepared. At the carriage, Bendrit told everyone to prepare. Insirian turned to Cylon, giving the signal to begin. Cylon acknowledged and passed the cue to Harayan. Harayan invoked his mana with a prayer, asking for divine peace. His spell activated, successfully blocking all the enemy's variables. Insirian confirmed that thanks to Harayan, the enemy's tricks were neutralized. With their strategy in place, Cylon smirked and suggested it was time to play a little game. Suddenly, the Red Blade's leader roared, commanding his warriors to attack. He declared that this battlefield would become their enemy's grave. But Insirian answered calmly, now was not the time to die. In the blink of an eye, he vanished from sight. The Red Blades were stunned, caught off guard. Then Insirian reappeared and swiftly cut down his targets with his sword. Another Red Blades member charged at Cylon, but Cylon calmly reminded him that Insirian had already said it wasn't time to die. In one smooth motion, Cylon cut down several Red Blades attackers, warning them not to underestimate trained experts. Seeing the fierce display, the Red Blades faltered, their confidence shaken. At a distance, watching the fight unfold, Bendrit turned to Telly, noting the enemy hadn't advanced yet. Telly observed that breaking through 2 seasoned experts was no easy task. But Bendrit suspected something more was going on. Telly's eyes narrowed as he realized the enemy was spreading out from the entrance. At this rate, they wouldn't be able to stop them all. They had to avoid being surrounded and prolong the fight strategically. Without hesitation, Telly activated a powerful spell. Storm, evolve with madness. The magic roared forth, catching the Red Blades off guard. In response, their members quickly warned their comrades to stay alert and avoid taking the blast head-on. The Red Blades' boss stepped forward with resolve, declaring he would break through the storm of wind. His men cheered, praising his strength and leadership. Insirian observed closely, noting to Cylon that the man was indeed an expert-class opponent. Cylon responded calmly, acknowledging that while the enemy leader may have reached expert level, there was still a significant difference between them. The Red Blade's boss could hold out for a moment, but not enough to fully stop Telly's magic. Eventually, even his strength began to falter. One of the Red Blade's soldiers noticed their formation crumbling. Alarmed, he shouted that the battle lines were collapsing. Their leader, realizing the urgency, commanded everyone to rise and rebuild the broken formation immediately. In the midst of the chaos, Dion stood quietly, lost in thought. The battle unfolding before him echoed the brutal truth he had long suspected. This world was cold and cruel. Laws and rules were shaped by those in power, and those without strength had no place. Reflecting on his first arrival here and his time in Holton, he recognized that survival was dictated by a merciless hierarchy. To live in this world, self-improvement was not just a goal, it was a necessity. But memories of his previous life clashed with that idea, creating a deep internal conflict. He questioned if the end of his journey was truly about adapting to such a reality. In a moment like this, where everyone fought desperately to survive, he felt foolish for letting himself be swept away in these thoughts. But ultimately, decisions had to be made, and forward was the only direction left. Telly's voice snapped him back to reality. She called out to him, saying she couldn't understand his conversation with the spirit, but warned him that the enemy was beginning to regroup and surround them again. She asked him to hurry. At that moment, Undine appeared beside Dion, her presence steady and comforting, an anchor amid the turmoil. Dion looked at Undine, asking if she had felt the conflict in his heart. Gently placing her hand under his chin, Undine reassured him with calm eyes. She reminded him that she was by his side and urged him to trust his heart without hesitation. Feeling steadier, Dion nodded and thanked her, saying he was fine now. His thoughts were finally beginning to settle. As Dion continued speaking with Undine, Telly, unable to see the spirit, grew confused. To him, it seemed as if Dion was talking to himself. Concerned, he asked what was wrong. Dion quickly dismissed his concern, claiming everything was fine, and then turned to Telly with a request. Telly asked about the nature of the favor, but before Dion could explain, he observed something strange. Dion's eyes, once lifeless, now held a new clarity. He then revealed his plan, a way to eliminate the enemy all at once. With the Red Blades trying to surround them again, they had little time. Insirian acknowledged their strategy and remarked to Cylon that their enemies were starting to think tactically. Cylon agreed, recognizing that at this rate they had no choice but to wipe them out completely. Meanwhile, Dion began summoning his spirit magic. At the same time, Bendrit shouted toward Insirian and Cylon, warning them to tell everyone to stay away from the carriage. The warning confused Insirian at first, but Cylon immediately understood that Dion must have been preparing something. Back among the Red Blades, their boss shouted in frustration. He questioned why they had no information about a spirit mage in the enemy ranks. Realizing the truth too late, he declared it a trap and ordered his men to regroup in the center and avoid the attack range. Dion unleashed his spirit magic, launching a powerful assault on the Red Blades. Their leader desperately tried to maintain control, shouting for everyone to stay calm and gather quickly. The realization that a spirit mage was among the warriors only fueled their panic. Cursing the warriors, the Red Blades swore vengeance and vowed to crush anyone in their way. As the chaos erupted, Telly calmly stated that he too had something prepared. It was a waste to simply send the enemy back unharmed. The Red Blade boss refused to give in. Filled with rage, he rushed from behind to launch a surprise attack on Insirian and Cylon. Cylon caught sight of the movement just in time and noted the presence of aura, a mark of an expert. He warned that using such power for evil would never end well. The Red Blade boss shouted with fury, declaring it couldn't end like this, and went in for the kill. Cylon dodged the attack with ease, mocking the idea that a group of mere bandits could ever defeat them. If anything, the boss should have brought a regular army. With swift precision, Cylon overpowered and defeated him. But before he could catch his breath, another enemy appeared behind him, ready to strike. Insirian intervened just in time, stepping in and mocking the attacker's desperation. He saw this as the perfect opportunity to erase the Red Blades for good. Her blade flashed, cutting the man down without hesitation. Turning to Cylon, he declared that the evil of the Red Blades would end here. Cylon pointed to the distance and asked if he could handle something even bigger. Insirian followed his gaze, eyes widening as he saw what Dion was creating. In that moment, he reflected on Dion's earlier words, how he had claimed he didn't want to fight without a reason. And yet, here he was, pushing himself this far. He wondered quietly if Dion had finally found his own purpose, and made his decision. Dion began conjuring his spirit magic, forming a massive and powerful blue circle that shimmered in the air. The Red Blades stared in confusion, unable to understand what he was creating. Undine appeared beside him, calmly urging him to release the spirit now. Responding to her, Dion dropped the spirit magic directly onto the Red Blades. The impact was devastating. The energy engulfed the enemies, wiping them out completely. Everyone around was stunned by Dion's performance. Insirian, watching in disbelief, couldn't fathom how someone with no known spirit bond could summon such overwhelming power. Cylon's thoughts echoed the confusion. Who truly was Dion, and how did he possess such a strong spirit? Bendrit approached Dion with awe, praising the grand, dramatic finish. Telly, still shocked, questioned how he could command a spirit so naturally. His thoughts remained unsettled. He couldn't shake the doubt. Was Dion truly on their side? And how could she even begin to understand or explain what she had just witnessed? Dion responded simply. He admitted he didn't know all the answers and wasn't seeking them either. All he did was share his heart with Undine. Telly was left speechless. Sharing a heart with a spirit? He had never heard of such a thing. Dion turned to Undine again, remarking that even Telly didn't seem to know much about this. Insirian, regaining focus, reminded Telly that if they were done talking, they needed to move on. Telly agreed and suggested they quickly hand over the enemies. Bendrit proposed a harsher alternative. Rather than reporting the defeated, he believed it would be better to eliminate them now. Otherwise, they would only hunt them down for revenge later. Cylon supported this view and asked Inserion for his decision. Inserion responded with firm logic. In a world like theirs, letting enemies live could lead to future danger. Dion, reflecting silently, acknowledged the harsh truth. If they spared their enemies now, those same enemies would likely return for revenge. In a world ruled by power, a life had to be repaid with another. However, Inserion paused. Despite the brutal logic, he reminded the group they were not murderers. More than mercenaries, they were adventurers. They hadn't been seriously harmed or injured in the battle. Cylon questioned if killing them now would be an unnecessary act of murder. Inserion clarified his position. The Red Blade faction was nearly destroyed. Even if they recovered, they wouldn't be the same force again. But if they dared to attack once more, he vowed not to let a single one survive. Telly quietly wished that things would end peacefully. Bendrit commended Inserion's leadership, calling it a sound decision. Hiron also praised him, calling her judgment wise. Inserion addressed everyone. He reminded them that for people like them, death was a constant shadow. Even when they didn't wish to kill, it wasn't always possible to avoid danger. The only path forward was to trust their own judgment, to do what was right in each moment. If they made mistakes, they had to correct them and keep moving forward. That was the only way to live without regret. Dion reflected deeply on his words. He understood that her final message was meant for him. In this harsh world, if he tried to live by the laws and values of his past life, he would only get hurt or be destroyed. Inserion's message was clear. When forced to choose, always select the better path over the worse and never look back with regret. After the battle concluded, the group made their way back to the castle. As they arrived, Dion felt the weight of the day pressing down on him. It had been a long and exhausting journey, and the memories of the intense battle still clung to him. The echoes of that fight hadn't faded from his mind. Cylon and Harion stayed behind, taking responsibility for tracking down and eliminating the remaining members of the Red Blade. Dion chose to remain as well, waiting for the arrival of the garrison. However, when he finally reached Jill's castle along with the rest of their party, Bent and Telly had already taken up work with the Telly Mercenary Guild, leaving just the two of them behind. Soon after, Inserion approached Dion. He stepped forward with a calm expression, expressing his gratitude for Dion's unwavering support till the very end. He thanked him sincerely, saying he was speaking on behalf of everyone. Dion, however, responded with humility, stating that he should be the one offering thanks instead. The two shared a firm handshake. Inserion acknowledged Dion's efforts, pointing out that if not for him, the battle would have dragged on longer and resulted in more casualties. Dion replied that he had only acted based on the situation, doing what he believed was necessary to ensure there were no regrets. Inserion chuckled, remarking on how Dion spoke in a way that could almost be embarrassing. Then, shifting his tone, he mentioned that he had a favor to ask. Dion agreed without hesitation, open to helping however he could. Inserion continued, explaining that he had two requests, assuring Dion that he would be compensated generously. The first request was simple. He asked if Dion would be willing to sell them his wagon. They needed a means of transportation for the journey back. Dion, unsure why he had even followed them this far, agreed without resistance and told him to just take it. Inserion expressed his thanks, then moved on to the second matter. It wasn't so much a request as it was a proposal. He wanted Dion to join their group officially, to become a member of the Warriors. Dion, taken aback by the offer, asked if Inserion had already spoken with the others. Inserion confirmed that he had. The conversations had all been concluded before Dion had even arrived. Every single one of them had agreed to welcome him into their ranks. Dion found himself caught off guard. It was an unexpected suggestion, and he wasn't sure how to respond. As he wrestled with his thoughts, Undine, the spirit only he could see, reminded him of his earlier words. He had told her that he liked them. When he hesitated, she pushed gently, saying there was no need to worry. Though the group was different from what he was used to, they would be helpful to him in their own ways. It would be a valuable opportunity to gain diverse experiences. But Dion's concern went deeper. He didn't know how to bring up Athos, a matter he hadn't yet been able to speak about. Inserion noticed Dion's hesitation and commented on it, sensing his unease. Dion admitted he was indeed a little worried. Everything was happening so suddenly. He felt unskilled, inexperienced, and unsure of himself. Inserion was surprised. He couldn't believe that the same person who had performed so impressively in battle was now doubting himself. Dion, uncomfortable, asked if he could have more time. Inserion, curious, asked him what he meant by that. Dion looked at Inserion and began to explain. He had spent most of his life behind an invisible wall, isolated from the world. He knew nothing, not even the purpose of his own existence. But everything had changed when he stepped outside and met Undine. Since then, he had experienced many things. Even if it was late, he felt the need to change. He admitted that he still lacked knowledge and wanted to understand the world better. So, he asked for some time to be sure before they met again. Inserion, concerned, asked what would happen if someone else tried to recruit him. Dion reassured him that it wouldn't happen. He couldn't miss such a valuable opportunity. But he had to be honest. He needed time. Inserion understood. He hadn't intended to pressure Dion. He promised to give him plenty of time and asked him not to worry. However, he also explained that there were conditions on their side. Dion should register with the mercenary corps so he could easily reconnect with them when ready. Dion agreed, calling it a good idea. With that, the matter was settled. Moments later, Bendrit and Telly approached them. Dion wondered if their work had already finished. Bendrit and Telly asked if they had a good conversation and how it went. Insirian replied that he wasn't sure if it could be called good or not. Telly responded that it was a bit unfortunate. Bendrit added that it couldn't be helped, though he regretted one thing. He wouldn't get to eat Dion's cooking anymore. Dion offered to share his recipe, but Bendrit refused. For him, food tasted best when someone else cooked it. Telly said he hoped they could be together next time. Meanwhile, he would look into Dion's abilities. Dion thanked him and promised not to make him wait long. Just as Telly was about to ask Dion something, Insirian cut in and said it was time to leave. Before parting, he handed Dion his share of the reward. Whether Dion saw it as a reward or the price for the wagon didn't matter. Insirian wanted him to accept it. Dion received it with gratitude. The group then began preparing to leave. Telly was called by Bendrit. As he walked away, he reflected quietly. He had figured out Dion's identity, but he also felt that he had missed his chance. Inside the carriage, just before departure, Insirian had one last favor to ask. He wanted Dion to leave updates through the Mercenary Guild. Dion agreed without hesitation, and Insirian added that they would also share their destination through the guild. Dion thanked him one final time as Insirian and his companions departed. Left alone, Dion reflected on everything that had happened. Until now, he had denied the reality of this world. Just as he couldn't always do things his way, this world, too, was unpredictable. But as Insirian had said, he could only do what he could. That thought gave him the strength to move forward. A soft smile appeared on his face. Undine, noticing it, asked him in surprise why he was smiling so naturally. Dion replied that he was just thinking about the future, and that made him feel excited. Undine teased him, wondering if he was happier without her. Dion denied it, saying that wasn't true. Her comparison wasn't even right. When she pressed for a proper answer, Dion brushed it off. It wasn't a big deal and he would tell her later. Deep inside, Dion knew the reason. He couldn't speak about his past life. Not yet. And perhaps, not to anyone. In the next scene, Dion was seen sleeping beside Undine. As he lay still, a strange dream began to unfold in his mind. In this dream, two unknown figures were having a conversation. One of them expressed surprise, admitting they hadn't expected intruders to be present. The other sounded concerned, worried that the situation might have been their fault, but promised to be more cautious in the future. They spoke about dreamwalking and how surprising it was to discover that the intruder was someone they already knew. Both agreed that he was dangerous. One speculated that his distortion might be even greater than the others. A whirling sensation filled the dream space as one of the voices hinted that something important had already been noticed. There was something one of them had in mind, something unresolved. Though it was too late to repair the barrier, they acknowledged how much growth had taken place. Time, however, waited for no one. It was time to part ways. One voice asked the other to promise. Next time. A whisper echoed through the dream calling Dion's name. Suddenly Dion's eyes snapped open. He found himself in an unfamiliar place and sat up slowly, confusion clouding his face. He wondered where he was. At that moment, Undine also woke up. The two greeted each other with quiet relief. Undine looked at him with concern and asked if he was feeling okay. Dion nodded and replied that he felt fine, though he couldn't remember how he had ended up there. He struggled to recall the sequence of events. Undine asked how much he remembered, and Dion tried to piece it together. He remembered leaving Insirian's party. After that, they had gone to the castle. Undine gently took over, explaining what had happened next. Dion had gone straight to the Mercenary Guild. A flashback followed. Dion, exhausted from overwork, dragged himself to the Mercenary Guild. There, a young woman greeted him warmly. She said she had been waiting for him. Dion, confused, asked why. She responded confidently, stating that she had heard from the warriors, specifically from Mr. Bendrit and Mr. Intellitic. According to them, a spirit mage had applied for mercenary registration, claiming to be part of the warriors. She had taken care of the necessary procedures for him. Dion realized what it was all about. This behavior reminded him of Insirian. The woman then brought up another matter. She had heard that Dion had wiped out the Red Blade. That alone, she said, could completely change his mercenary grade. Dion asked if it would really affect his rank. She confirmed that if the feat was verified, he would qualify as an A-class mercenary. Dion's expression turned strange, as if something was wrong. Both the woman and Undine noticed and asked if he was okay. Before they could get an answer, Dion collapsed and lost consciousness. The scene shifted back to the present. Undine finished recounting the events. After Dion fainted, he was taken to the mercenary quarters. Though she wasn't entirely sure, she believed it was a rebound, an after effect of excessive spirit power usage. Dion might have been the first to experience something like that. But Dion thought to himself that Telly had once told him he didn't have spirit power. Undine's voice snapped him out of his thoughts. She shouted his name, demanding to know if he was even listening. Her voice shook with frustration and worry. She told him just how concerned she had been. Dion responded calmly, assuring her that he was all right now. He acknowledged that she had stayed up all night to heal him and thanked her. He apologized for making her worry. Her expression softened, though she complained that saying things like that all of a sudden made him a meanie. Dion turned serious again. He said they could look into rebounds later. For now, there was no time to relax. Undine asked what was going on. Dion reminded her that they had come for mercenary certification. The Viscount of Holton might be after them. After recovering, Dion returned once more to the mercenary guild. She assured him it was safe. There would be no problems with Lord Holton. A-class mercenaries were considered valuable assets within the kingdom. Dion's abilities and his proof of achievement had already been verified by the warriors. She mentioned the growing tale of Dion, now known as the Saint of Water, a name that had become recognized even beyond Viscount Holton's territory. Hearing the title again, Dion paused for a moment, his thoughts clouded. He never imagined he'd hear that name once more. The woman continued, explaining that the warriors had also recommended his promotion. She reminded him that Holton's workshop had previously failed to recruit the warriors. This realization made Dion connect the pieces. That was why Ansirian had aligned himself with Viscount Holton. He thought to himself that Holton deserved what was coming. Elsewhere, Cylon, upon hearing about Holton, reacted with anger and mocked the Viscount's name in front of his friends. Bendrit sighed, wondering if Holton was still acting the same way. Hieron firmly stated that Dion was now a recognized member of the warriors. Telly spoke with conviction, saying he couldn't let them take Dion. Ansirian, on the other hand, dismissed the resistance as nonsense. He insisted that the Viscount must be informed and warned them that if they didn't want to face humiliation again, they should hand over Dion. Back at the guild, Dion reflected on the girl's words. He realized she probably believed he should have joined the team without so much hesitation. Just then, the girl recalled something she had forgotten. Smiling, she handed him an A-class mercenary card and informed him that he was now officially certified by the Jellies Mercenary Guild. Later, as Dion sat inside the carriage, staring out at the passing landscape, thoughts stirred in his mind. The moment he had left the Mercenary Guild, he had also departed from Jail's castle, setting off on a journey of his own. That path had been filled with unexpected events, each one pushing him forward until, without even realizing it, he had become an A-class mercenary. He felt the need to gain even more experience. He had left like an ordinary man, just as he had once left his hometown. But now, he had climbed to the top. Suddenly, a loud commotion broke through his thoughts. Shouts echoed from outside the carriage. Curious, Dion leaned forward and looked out. Just a short distance away, a battle was unfolding. A mercenary was locked in combat with a monster. Dion watched closely. The man fought with precision and calm. Each strike was smoothly dodged, every move calculated. Then, with a swift motion of his sword, the mercenary brought the creature down. Dion studied him carefully. His movements were refined, undeniably the work of someone with considerable experience. He acknowledged the mercenary's skill but knew that even such talent didn't compare to the might of true warriors. A group of merchants soon approached the mercenary. They recognized the creature he had defeated. It was just an orc. Still, they praised him for the swift victory, impressed by his swordplay and effectiveness in battle. The mercenary accepted their praise with a nod but reminded them that this delay had consequences. He urged them to prepare for departure quickly. He had no time to waste or indulge in distractions. One of the merchants seemed confused. He questioned the delay, pointing out that the orcs had loot. There were 7 of them, and ignoring that seemed careless. He wondered aloud if the mercenary didn't understand such basics. Perhaps he was a newcomer. The mercenary's tone turned sharp. He reminded them that they were at the border now. This wasn't the time for such trivial thoughts. Elsewhere, deeper within the surrounding forest, movement stirred. From behind the bushes and trees, several pairs of glowing red eyes emerged. One of the men pointed toward the forest hut, noticing some movement within. He informed the powerful mercenary, but the mercenary paid little attention. Brushing it off, he assumed it was nothing of concern. Meanwhile, inside the carriage, he recalled from the monster encyclopedia that orcs never traveled in small numbers. They moved in groups, with scouts always roaming ahead. If one appeared, many more were likely nearby. Just as the thought settled, the hidden monsters burst from the foliage and launched a sudden attack on the mercenaries. The seasoned mercenary instantly took command, instructing the merchants to run in the carriage. With swift, practiced strikes, he cut down the monsters one after another, though fatigue weighed on him. It was a bad day, and he was already worn out. Among the orcs, a commanding voice rang out. One of the monsters roared to its pack, urging them to kill everyone. Realizing the orcs could understand human speech, the lead mercenary signaled his group to form up, calling attention to the monster's awareness. Panic spread among the less experienced members. One man worried about his luggage, only for another to scold him, reminding him that his life mattered more than his belongings. A priest-like figure stepped forward, invoking the holy light to shield them. The battle began in full force. The orcs charged as one, thundering toward the group. The mercenaries stood firm behind their shields, prepared for impact. Watching from the side, Dion turned to Undine, knowing they had to intervene and support the struggling defenders. Soon the other mercenary joined the fight, using their shields to push back the advancing monsters. Dion knew that orcs reproduced quickly, and their society followed a strict hierarchy. They matured within a year, leading to large populations. Though less intelligent than humans, they were physically stronger. With the number of mercenaries so small, the situation was becoming dire. Dion sensed this battle would not be easy. Unlike the previous one-sided encounter with the Red Blade, this was going to be a real test, and with no wizard present, their own responsibilities had grown. Undine acknowledged the task ahead, ready for the work that waited. Just then, someone shouted at Dion, warning him that standing still made him an easy target. He was urged to get moving. In response, Dion began summoning his spirit magic. The man who had spoken was shocked, realizing Dion was a spirit mage. With that, his earlier concern vanished. Dion's mind drifted back to the Red Blade battle. Back then, the overwhelming power of the warriors had made the fight one-sided. But now, this was his chance to truly test his own abilities. Undine informed him that the spirit magic was ready for attack. Elsewhere in the chaos, an orc monster shattered a mercenary's shield and was about to strike. In that moment, Dion unleashed his spirit magic, striking the orc and saving the mercenary just in time. The mercenary, grateful, expressed his thanks. Dion, calm and focused, saw this as a good start. Saving those in danger, this was how he would begin. Once that was done, he would focus on wiping out the orcs completely. He turned to Undine again, clarifying that this time, precision was more important than brute force. Undine understood immediately and acknowledged his command. Dion raised his hand, unleashing his spirit magic across the battlefield. The glowing force surged through the air, striking down orc monsters one after another. From amidst the chaos, the orc leader growled in frustration, realizing that a spirit mage had joined the fight. The presence of a spirit mage quickly lifted the morale of the mercenary. One of them, astonished, exclaimed that with Dion fighting alongside them, they now stood a real chance against the orc monsters. Without slowing down, Dion continued his assault, targeting each monster with precision. His spirit magic cut through the enemy ranks, leaving no room for retaliation. The mercenary leader, now emboldened, rallied his group. With urgency in his voice, he reminded them that this was the perfect opportunity. With a spirit mage on their side, they had to strike now and eliminate the orcs completely. Under Dion's cover, the mercenaries advanced. His magic rained down while the group moved in formation, overwhelming the remaining orcs. The seasoned mercenary, watching this coordination unfold, felt a sense of relief. With the spirit mage supporting them, the battle had shifted. Now they could fight freely without being pushed back. Amid the aftermath, Dion turned his attention to the wounded. The mercenary looked on, astonished not only by his magical strength but also by his ability to heal. Just as calm began to return, a new wave of orc monsters stormed into the battlefield. These ones were stronger, fiercer, and all heading straight for Dion. Undine, sensing the danger, appeared beside him and asked if he wanted her to end the battle in one decisive move. Dion quietly gave his command and Undine responded instantly. With a wave of immense power, she unleashed her spirit magic, wiping out all the remaining orc monsters in a single devastating attack. The mercenary, unaware of Undine's presence, watched in awe. They couldn't see her, but the overwhelming magic left no doubt in their minds. As expected from a spirit mage, his power alone had turned the tide. As calm returned to the battlefield, Dion's thoughts drifted into deeper contemplation. He began questioning the orcs' aggression. Why did orcs plunder humans? Was it because they possessed the intelligence to develop their own civilization? Why did monsters attack humans at all? Was it hatred born from differences in appearance? Or was it because humans threatened the survival of their species? No matter how much he thought, he couldn't find a single clear reason. Suddenly, a sharp pain struck him. He looked down in disbelief and saw a knife embedded in his abdomen. He had no idea when or how it happened. The pain surged through him as his vision blurred and his eyes closed in response. Undine appeared beside him, visibly worried, and asked if he was okay, but Dion's mind was spinning. He tried to recall when he was attacked and how it had happened. Doubt crept in. Had he become arrogant? He realized he had stopped using his dagger. He had stopped training. Maybe that carelessness had cost him. He wondered if the wound had come from a knife thrown by an orc. He had trusted Undine completely and failed to stay alert himself. His body trembled as he struggled to stay conscious. He knew he had to ask Undine for healing, but everything felt dizzy. He tried to regain focus, but his mind was fading. In that moment, he understood. No one could protect him right now. He had to find the strength to endure. Undine, filled with guilt and fury, blamed herself. Dion was hurt because she failed to protect him. Her sorrow turned into rage, and she vowed to make every monster pay for hurting him. Her expression shifted as she promised to tear them all apart. The scene briefly shifted away from the battlefield to a mysterious figure. This person looked exactly like the one Dion had seen in his dreams. With an intrigued expression, the figure observed the unfolding events from afar, remarking that something interesting was happening and pondering whether to wait and see how it all played out. The narrative then returned to the chaos of the battlefield. Undine, consumed by rage and sorrow, released a force of spirit magic so intense that it left the surrounding mercenary in awe. The ground split under the sheer pressure of Undine's power, the spirit of water now boiling with destructive energy. Tears mixed with anger as Undine cried out, furious that the orc monsters had tried to kill Dion. Her wrath surged into magic and the very air trembled as she vowed to destroy them all. Dion, watching helplessly, realized there was no way to stop her now. Her emotions had taken full control. The mercenary, terrified by the overwhelming energy, considered fleeing toward their carriages for safety. Undine then unleashed her immense power upon the remaining orc monsters. Screams filled the air as the monsters were struck by the attack. Overwhelmed, they cried out in despair, admitting defeat. Those still alive turned and began to retreat in fear. Seeing this, the mercenaries were stunned. They looked at one another in disbelief, confirming that the remaining orcs were indeed fleeing. Realization hit. Against all odds, they had won. Joy spread as they celebrated their hard-fought victory. Dion, however, could barely register the moment. He was in pain and collapsed to the ground. One man rushed to his side, panicked, and asked if he was all right. Realizing how badly Dion was injured, others quickly gathered and urged to move the spirit mage to safety. Undine approached Dion, tears still streaming down her face. Her voice trembled with guilt as she blamed herself for failing to protect him. Dion, weakened but conscious, reassured her that it wasn't her fault, it was his. Reflecting silently, Dion admitted that although he felt stronger after several battles emotionally, he had grown arrogant. He acknowledged the immaturity he carried even after reincarnation. It saddened him to see how mentally unprepared he truly was. He quietly apologized to Undine. She, in turn, asked if there was anything she could do for him. Dion humbly requested her healing water that held incredible restorative power. As she began the healing process, Dion watched her with renewed clarity. Seeing Undine, a young spirit so concerned for him, cleared the fog in his mind and reignited his sense of duty. He could feel their shared connection awaken as her healing energy entered him. Despite the wound being deep, he believed healing was possible with the full force of Undine's magic. The pain began to ease as her water took effect, and he could feel the damage begin to reverse. It took immense mental strength. Slowly, he attempted to remove the blade lodged in his abdomen. Panic spread among nearby people as more arrived, hearing rumors that the spirit mage was severely injured. They surrounded him, worried and breathless. With great effort, Dion finally pulled the knife from his wound. Bloodied but calm, he held it in his trembling hand as Undine's healing magic continued to mend his body. Despite the pain, he insisted that he was fine and urged the others to tend to the more seriously wounded first. The priests watching were stunned. They could hardly believe he was able to stand, considering the damage likely inflicted on his internal organs. One of them silently wondered if he had already recovered, finding the idea absurd. For a spirit mage to display such rapid healing was unheard of. Undine confirmed that Dion's treatment was complete, though she advised caution. Dion acknowledged her help with gratitude. In his thoughts, he reflected on Undine's incredible healing powers. To recover so quickly from such severe symptoms was nothing short of remarkable. He had taken quite a beating in this battle, but decided to treat it as a valuable experience to better prepare for future challenges. Determined to avoid burdening Undine further, he resolved to train his body and grow stronger. He knew the path ahead was uncertain and was committed to keeping up with the warriors they would eventually meet again. Meanwhile, the priests whispered among themselves, astonished by Dion's resilience. One mentioned never having seen a spirit mage like him, while the other speculated whether he might be Holton's legendary water saint. Dion, overhearing them, snapped them back to reality, urging them to focus on treating the wounded instead of chatting. The priests immediately agreed and moved to assist. Dion reminded them that the battle had just ended and many others likely needed help more urgently than him. Undine, overjoyed at Dion's recovery, embraced him. Dion reassured her once again that it was all thanks to her. The scene gradually transitioned to the fortified city of Holista, located on the border of the Dwarn Kingdom. Known for its high population density, Holista served as both a commercial hub and a vital defense line. The city bustled with a wide variety of professions, from merchants to mercenaries. Despite the risks, it remained a favorite stop for travelers. Walking through the streets of Holista, Dion told Undine about his intention to train there for a while. Undine expressed concern about him getting hurt again, but Dion promised to be careful. His goal was to become strong enough so that Undine wouldn't have to overexert herself healing him all the time. When Undine asked where he was headed, Dion responded with a knowing smile. She would find out soon enough. The two eventually reached their destination. Dion recalled how, upon first arriving in Holista, he had purchased an old house on the city's outskirts and remodeled it. With the help of mercenaries, the process was smoother than expected. Since most of the city's forces had been dispatched to defend the border, there was little interference. Dion's familiarity with travel had also helped him secure a good property more easily. Undine, seeing the completed house, asked if he was finally moving in. Dion confirmed it. He had just finished the interior and moved in that very day. Undine was pleased. It smelled fresh and felt like home. Dion admitted it had cost a lot of money, but considered it a worthy investment. Still, the future weighed on his mind. While staying at the Mercenary Guild during the house construction, Dion had received several work requests. If all went according to plan, things would work out. But he knew it wouldn't be easy. There would be both risks and rewards, especially given their proximity to the border. He planned to stay in Holista for a long time to train. For him, this marked a fresh beginning. He had crafted a plan, but everything depended on execution. Money, too, was a pressing concern. He had only 120 gold pieces left. It might not be enough if things didn't go smoothly. He needed to earn more, and fast. At the back of his mind, he even considered asking Undine for help. Doing it alone was proving to be too slow. Noticing Dion deep in thought, Undine gently asked if something was bothering him. Dion, with a serious expression, admitted that he needed Undine's help from now on. Undine, ever eager to support him, asked what she could do and offered her strength wholeheartedly. If Dion wished for something, she promised to do her best without hesitation. Dion thanked her, his tone sincere. In that moment, he realized the depth of Undine's unwavering trust in him. Undine, smiling gently, shared that she liked hearing Dion thank her. It made her happy to be his strength, to feel needed. She confessed that it was comforting not to be alone anymore. All of these feelings, gratitude, belonging, companionship, had been taught to her by Dion himself. The realization struck Dion deeply. He questioned whether he had changed Undine. A pure spirit, untouched by human complications, now expressed feelings she hadn't known before. If he had formed a standard spirit contract and treated her like a mere tool, he would have never learned the true meaning of emotion. The weight of responsibility pressed down on him. If his influence was leading Undine down a wrong path, it would be his burden to carry. Suddenly, alarmed, Undine rushed to his side and asked if his wound had reopened. Dion, struggling to stay composed, reminded himself not to fall into weakness. He had to grow stronger, not just for himself, but to avoid becoming a burden. He didn't want Undine to worry anymore. He reaffirmed his resolve. Humans were imperfect by nature, but it was this very imperfection that pushed them to improve. If things went well, he would live with no regrets. Whatever awaited him at the end, he would face it. He reassured Undine, telling her it was just a sudden bout of sickness and not to worry. Inwardly, Dion couldn't help but laugh at himself. After everything that had happened in his previous life, it was almost unbelievable that he now possessed a will to live. But that resolve was real. He would now begin to act on everything he had been thinking about. Looking ahead, he promised Undine that everything would be different from now on. Undine, her eyes gleaming with hope, said she would look forward to that change. Dion asked her to watch over him, and she agreed with a bright smile. Together they stood at the beginning of a new journey. A new chapter had begun. Months had passed since Dion settled into his new home. It was a house he had prepared in advance, meant to support his long-term goals. He even gave it a name, Healer Spirit, to establish its identity and purpose. To operate legitimately, Dion reported the establishment to the temple and sought formal permission. One day, a priest addressed Dion, acknowledging that since the clinic was located outside the town's boundaries, there would be no conflict with the temple. In fact, he encouraged Dion's initiative. Dion agreed and moved ahead with the plan. The clinic's location on the outskirts required additional effort for visibility. To attract visitors, Dion decided to prepare promotional materials. He visited the Mercenary Guild and asked for help in spreading word of mouth. And since the cost of treatment at the temple was high, Dion offered discounted treatment through his clinic, a proposal the guild readily accepted. Posters and notices were also put up in the downtown areas, but despite the efforts, income remained low. Time moved on, and seasons began to change. Customers remained scarce, but Dion didn't allow the lull to waste his time. Instead, he dove deep into learning. He purchased books on history and aura cultivation, and as planned, studied theoretical materials, combat manuals, and swordsmanship guides. He read extensively, absorbing everything needed for his future journey, until there was nothing left unread. His aura, which had remained dormant for a long time, was slowly being awakened again through steady practice. The process was gradual, focused on regaining lost senses and refining control. Inside his clinic, Dion continued practicing spirit magic. He tested whether the phenomenon could be sustained at his current level. Although his aura control had not reached the peak of an expert, the foundation was being solidified. Meanwhile, Undine, always at his side, expanded her understanding of the world by reading books. Through spirit sense sharing, they now communicated and understood each other on a much deeper level. Then, a sudden sensation alerted Undine. 5 mercenaries were approaching. Moments later, there was a knock at the clinic door. The mercenaries had arrived, carrying with them an unconscious comrade in urgent need of treatment. Undine, concerned, asked Dion if he would see them. Dion hesitated. He reminded himself that he was not a professional healer. The power behind the treatment was Undine's, not his. He wondered aloud whether magical healing and traditional medicine were truly different. As he looked at the unfamiliar mercenaries, Dion realized they likely ended up at his clinic by mistake simply because it was isolated. The time for familiar, trusted mercenaries to arrive hadn't come yet. Dion wondered if the man outside had come after hearing the rumors, hoping to buy a cure. He turned to Undine, curious about her thoughts. Undine, calmly assessing the situation, noted that they didn't recognize the visitor. But it did seem like an emergency. One of them appeared dangerously low on vitality, likely suffering from a severe injury. Hearing this, Dion questioned why they hadn't gone to the temple instead. Outside, a desperate voice called out again, pounding on the door, urging them to open up due to the urgent condition of their comrade. The patient had already been placed on a stretcher. Undine confirmed the situation. The man was indeed on a stretcher, signaling urgency. Dion asked if the condition was truly that serious, and Undine affirmed it. By human standards, it was critical. Dion realized they couldn't ignore the emergency. They had to at least examine the patient's condition. Outside, one mercenary expressed concern about the early hour and lack of response from both the temple and the clinic. Another insisted they try knocking again. Soon after, Dion opened the door, stepping outside. He asked about the commotion, reminding them the clinic hadn't opened yet. One of the mercenaries quickly apologized. Dion reassured him that there was no need for apologies. That mercenary, surprised by Dion's aquamarine hair, suspected his identity. He explained he had come on the recommendation of the guild. The mention of the guild signaled urgency to Dion. He asked what business they had at the clinic. The mercenary inquired if this was the healing center of spirit mage Dion, apologized for arriving at dawn and breaking etiquette, and explained that they had an emergency patient. Undine, sensing the patient's state, observed that the man was barely maintaining vitality using potions. Dion, speaking softly to Undine, admitted this was his first time in such a situation, but resolved that they had to at least try to save him. Since only Dion could see Undine, he took the lead. He asked about the patient's condition. The mercenary explained that their comrade had suffered a serious injury during battle, losing an arm and barely surviving with the help of a potion. Dion allowed them inside but warned he wasn't sure how much help he could offer. As they entered the clinic carrying the injured man, the mercenaries immediately felt the warmth inside. Despite it being winter outside, the air inside was filled with a spring-like heat. One of them wondered aloud if such warmth was even possible, suspecting it was the work of a spirit. Another mercenary recalled the rumors, tales about Viscount Holton and how he had defeated orcs. According to a guild guide, it was an A-class mercenary who had recommended Dion. The guide had also told him to seek out the spirit mage and mentioned that Dion carried the blade of a thief. Dion asked them to lay the patient down. The mercenary complied, though he was skeptical, thinking Dion looked too young to be a healer. But he reminded himself not to judge someone who was trying to help during a life-or-death moment. Meanwhile, the other mercenaries exchanged hushed doubts among themselves. Dion's youthful appearance stirred their uncertainty. One warned the others to mind their words and be grateful that the boy had opened the door at such an hour. Another insisted that if anything went wrong, the responsibility would fall on their captain. They couldn't believe a boy like Dion could be the spirit mage from the rumors. The captain, however, addressed Dion directly, ignoring the doubts of his team. He admitted that the temple hadn't helped them and apologized for their rudeness. He had heard Dion's name from the mercenary guild and those who had fought the orcs. Dion calmly said he understood. Since this was their first meeting, he introduced himself once again with quiet confidence. Tension flared among the mercenaries as they turned toward Dion, their expressions hardened with distrust. One of them, unable to hold back his frustration, questioned how they were supposed to know if this man was truly who he claimed to be. The rumors surrounding Viscount Holton were strange and unverified, and none of them were willing to believe tales of a so-called spirit doctor. To them it sounded like nonsense. Another mercenary, overwhelmed by panic and desperation, pointed to their critically injured comrade. With urgency in his voice, he shouted that their colleague was dying, insisting this wasn't the time for hesitation. He blamed Captain Curter for the delay. Dion flinched slightly, thoughts swirling in his mind. He wondered if the mercenary's outburst was too harsh. Should he have responded earlier? Was staying silent a mistake? Captain Curter, meanwhile, weighed the situation silently. He recalled the accusations. Those rumors said this man Dion was responsible. Still, he spoke firmly, telling his men to stop. Complaints could wait. If none of them could save their injured friend right now, then they needed to stay quiet and step aside. Turning to Dion, the captain's tone softened. He apologized for repeatedly showing this harsh, distrustful side of himself. Yet the tension hadn't subsided. Another mercenary stepped forward, his tone sharp and skeptical. In his experience, rumors were often twisted, filled with lies and exaggerations. He didn't trust them. He then addressed Dion directly, asking if he intended to use the treatment as a lesson, to prove something. Dion calmly responded, stating that nothing trivial could be done until he had seen the patient. They lacked information, and without that, assumptions were meaningless. He was ready to begin. Without delay, Dion began conjuring his healing magic. Water shimmered in the air, forming gentle droplets as the temperature in the room began to fall. The mercenaries looked around, surprised by the sudden chill in the atmosphere. One of them whispered that it was getting cold, and another confirmed it. The air had shifted. Captain Curter observed in silence, his eyes focused on the spell forming before him. He reminded himself not to judge solely based on appearances. That had never been wise. A faint sigh escaped his lips as he sensed something familiar. Spirits were near. Their presence reminded him of the beings he had encountered long ago. This healing was unlike anything he'd seen, and deep down, he thought that Viscount Holton was finally getting what he deserved. Dion, still focused on the process, explained that the temperature drop was intentional. It was meant to prevent infection. The mercenaries looked confused. Preventing infection wasn't something they'd heard much about. Dion clarified quickly. Bacteria multiply faster in high temperatures. Lowering the heat was the first step to stopping the spread. That was all they needed to understand for now. Treatment would begin soon. He gave one final instruction. The room had been purified. Nothing should be touched. The mercenaries eventually stepped back, their tension easing slightly. A few exchanged glances and agreed to wait, just as Captain Curter had instructed. For now, they would watch and see. Meanwhile, the captain stood in quiet disbelief. Dion had silenced the unrest with a single presence, something even he couldn't manage before. Deep inside, he admitted that if they rushed to the temple now, the injured man would likely die before arrival. All hope was now placed in the hands of the spirit mage standing before them. Dion calmly assessed the patient, noting multiple fatal stab wounds across the body. The right arm had been amputated, though some form of basic first aid had already been applied. He instructed Undine to preserve the healing magic for now, focusing solely on the patient first before proceeding further. Undine responded affirmatively, ready to assist. Turning to Captain Curter, Dion remarked that the attacker seemed highly skilled in swordsmanship. The captain confirmed it with surprise, asking how Dion knew. Dion inquired whether the opponent was an aura expert, warning that they had fallen into a trap. The enemy had simply been too strong. He pointed out that the sword cuts were not rough. They were clean and precise. That alone made the patient's survival astonishing. Then, Dion quietly requested something from Undine, an advanced technique. She understood and agreed without hesitation. In his mind, Dion reflected on the various treatment methods used by priests and wizards. However, true success depended heavily on the individual's skill. By combining his past life's basic medical knowledge with this era's magic, he had developed techniques that few could replicate. As Undine handed over a special sensor, the entire clinic filled with a soft blue aura. A wave of energy washed over the room. Dion recognized what it was, another dimensional perspective only visible to spirits. It was a unique layer of perception, one of many that Undine could access. The mercenaries were stunned, and one of them nervously asked the captain if he could take back his earlier words. Captain Curter dismissed him, urging everyone to simply keep watching. Through this new sense, Dion saw the flow of life and energy, visualizing the essence of the patient's condition. It was as if he had entered a new realm, one untouched by ordinary perception. This was the depth of spirit arts, a rare bond between him and Undine. Undine observed the patient and concluded that the nerves weren't dead yet. Although hemostasis had been achieved, no further treatment had been applied. Dion noted that it had already been 6 hours since the bleeding was stopped. He asked if healing was still possible. Undine took a closer look and confirmed that the patient's vitality was intact. While she had never tried this before, she believed it was worth attempting. Dion then asked the captain if they had brought the severed arm. Curter confirmed they had but questioned his intent. Dion observed the clean cut and lack of sutures. In his view, it wasn't too late. The captain admitted he didn't understand, but Undine supported Dion's assessment, stating that based on Dion's knowledge, the success rate was high. Dion clarified that he intended to reattach the arm. The captain, shocked, asked if that was truly possible. Dion explained that while there was no guarantee, he had to try. The longer they waited, the slimmer the chances. Hearing this, Captain Curter made the decision without hesitation. He called out to Jed to bring the severed arm immediately, and Jed complied. Dion prepared himself mentally. He heightened the shared sense between him and Undine, focusing on the blood vessels and nerve endings. As his concentration deepened, a vision unfolded before him. It was as if he had entered a new world, a universe of intricate systems. He remembered hearing in his past life that the human body was a microcosm. Now, seeing it through the spirit's eyes, he understood that concept more deeply than ever. With that connection in place, Dion began the spirit-based surgery. Undine joined him, guiding and supporting the process. The atmosphere shifted, and the observing mercenaries stood frozen in awe. Time passed. Eventually, the operation reached its end. The joint was successfully reattached, and the energy in the room slowly settled. Dion and Undine looked at each other and shared a brief moment of acknowledgement. The effort had paid off. They had done well. The mercenary captain stepped forward, his voice filled with cautious hope. He asked if it was over. Dion confirmed that the surgery and treatment were complete. While the arm might not function as it once did, with effort and rehabilitation, movement would be possible. Even if the recovery wasn't perfect, it would be far better than losing the limb entirely. The captain was relieved. That alone was more than enough. He thanked the spirit mage sincerely, acknowledging that not even priests could achieve what Dion had done. Curter, however, couldn't help but worry. A healer this skilled must demand a steep price. What would the treatment cost? The other mercenaries echoed that concern, asking Captain Curter about the fee. The cost of priestly healing often ran high. Dion responded calmly. He wasn't a priest, he was a spirit mage, and unlike the temples, his treatment came at a flat rate, just 1 gold. The captain was stunned, questioning if he had misheard. The fee was only 1 gold coin? That seemed unbelievably cheap. Unsure, he turned to the other mercenaries for confirmation. They all agreed. They needed to ask again. The captain approached Dion once more, asking about the treatment fee. Dion reaffirmed it calmly. Yes, it was indeed just 1 gold. The captain, surprised, clarified that he wasn't complaining, only shocked by how affordable it was. Dion admitted that reattaching a severed arm had been a gamble for him as well, but felt a deep sense of reward from overcoming such a difficult challenge. The captain then praised Dion, calling him a true saint of water. Dion credited their trust, saying it was only possible because they believed in him until the end. With a light tone, the captain pointed to the rest of the mercenaries, suggesting they be excluded from the praise. The others quickly apologized, bowing their heads to the spirit mage. Recognizing the captain's fatigue from coming all the way from the battlefield, Dion offered him healing water. The other mercenaries recognized the name, Holton's healing water, and asked if it truly reduced fatigue. Dion offered no confirmation, only inviting them outside. As they stepped out, the captain compared costs in his mind. A temple potion cost 10 gold. A wizard's potion cost 5. But this? A severed arm reattached for only 1 gold? It was an unimaginable bargain. And unlike potions or spells, not even priests could perform such a feat. He wondered how someone like Dion had appeared at the border and suspected there must be a reason behind his concealment of his true identity. Catching the captain's gaze, Dion asked if something was on his face. The mercenary responded, embarrassed, that he had simply been fascinated. Dion then offered his healing water to them, suggesting they drink it immediately. The captain admitted he had only heard of healing water but never tasted it. As they drank, a wave of astonishment washed over them. They felt immediate refreshment, their strength restored, and their fatigue vanishing. The captain, overwhelmed by the effect, silently accepted the possibility. This man might truly be the saint of water. Everything about Dion fit the role perfectly, starting with his presence. Moved, the captain handed Dion 2 gold coins. Dion, surprised, reminded him that the cost was only 1. The captain insisted, and Dion gratefully accepted, saying the extra gold could be used next time. Inwardly, the captain noted that while he had met spirit mages before, none had been like Dion. This man was destined for greatness. He decided then and there to build a relationship with him before others could. Jed approached, announcing they were ready to leave. The captain agreed it was time to return. Dion informed them the patient would be moved to the recovery room and they were welcome to visit. He also promised to contact the guild once the patient regained consciousness. The captain thanked him again, relying now on Dion to care for his comrade. With that, they departed. As they left, Dion turned to Undine, noting that the mercenaries were finally gone. She praised him for his efforts. Dion in turn thanked her, saying it was all thanks to her support. Undine downplayed her role, saying she only helped someone who was seriously injured, and that Dion's encouragement had motivated her. Dion thanked her sincerely. A few days passed, and word of the event began to spread. Dion started serving healing water to mercenaries and ordinary citizens alike. Each one offered their gratitude after drinking. The rumors grew. Mercenaries spoke among themselves, marveling that this was the spirit mage's treatment center. One noted that Dion had reattached a severed arm. Another pointed out that not everyone yet knew about the Saint of Water, and that it was fine. He didn't mind keeping it that way. The excitement over being able to drink healing water filled their voices. Dion explained that he had created a water tank using memories from his past life. Thanks to it, he no longer faced difficulties in procuring healing water. Of course, it was Undine who created the healing water itself. Soon the very mercenary whose life Dion had saved returned. He approached Dion with something in hand. Dion recognized him and gratefully received the item he had requested earlier. The mercenary conveyed greetings from Holton's merchants and passed along their thanks. Dion returned the greeting through him and smiled warmly. Before leaving, the mercenary made one more request. He wanted to share healing water with his comrades. Dion had already anticipated this and handed over a prepared supply, asking him to deliver it to his unit in time. As the mercenary left, Dion reflected that the power of the healing water was no longer a secret. Thanks to the growing rumors, he had earned nearly 2,000 gold in no time. More customers began to visit him. Undine, excited, informed him of the crowd. Dion smiled and suggested they call it a day. Then gently, he mentioned her constant work since that fateful day. Undine denied any exhaustion, assuring him she was fine and doing a good job. Dion, moved by her loyalty, praised her and presented a gift, a spirit stone. Dion handed the spirit stone to Undine, but a thought crossed his mind. What if another strange phenomenon occurred like last time? However, as Undine began to eat the spirit stone and thanked him with her usual cheer, nothing unusual happened this time. No phenomena, no strange reactions. While munching on the stone, Undine glanced at Dion and asked if he really got her another spirit stone, noting how expensive they were. Dion reassured her, telling her it was all right. It was all thanks to her. He had collected the spirit stones by asking various peddlers around the area. They had 12 in total, and he bought them all. But only 2 among them were water spirit stones. He explained that he had bought the rest just in case they could be exchanged for water spirit stones later. Undine seemed concerned. 12 stones? Wasn't that too much? She reminded him he needed to save money. Wasn't it wasteful to spend it like this? Dion responded that if the exchange didn't work, she could always resell the stones. Besides, there was no point in holding on to money without using it. Undine nodded, understanding his logic. Dion then brought up how attracting too much attention suddenly could be dangerous. Undine agreed if that was the reason. He asked if she knew what he was referring to. Undine, ever sharp, mentioned the incident in the city. Even now, Dion was still drawing attention. Dion was surprised she knew about it, but Undine proudly stated that she was smart. His behavior was unusual, so it was natural for people to take notice. No matter what he did, she agreed with him. Dion admitted he was aware and was trying to come up with a solution. Undine said it seemed like there was no way to avoid attention. Dion confessed that perhaps he was doing too many outrageous things, and Undine agreed. His thinking was different from the rest. That's why Dion told her there was somewhere he wanted to go with her. But first, she should finish the Spirit Stone. Undine beamed with joy, saying she'd go anywhere as long as she was with him, and then hurriedly gobbled up the stone. Dion watched her and thought she didn't need to rush while eating. After finishing the stone, Undine thanked him again, and together, they headed outside to meet a customer. As they walked, Undine smiled at the peaceful surroundings. She loved how calm everything felt. Dion was relieved too. It was far from the castle, and the distance brought quiet. In fact, this was one of the methods he was using to stay out of the spotlight. He hinted at this, but Undine admitted she had no idea what he meant. Just then, a mercenary spotted them and shouted to everyone that a new landlord had arrived. Dion recognized the man. It was the janitor. The janitor introduced Dion as the future owner of the farmland. Dion greeted everyone, introducing himself simply as Dion. One merchant, startled, asked everyone to lower their voices. He hadn't seen Dion before and asked if he was from the spirit clinic. Dion was surprised. How did they know that? He wondered if they were patients from the treatment center. A mercenary spoke up, expressing gratitude to Dion. Thanks to the healing water, his life had become easier. Dion humbly replied that he was the one who should be thankful. He didn't recall seeing them inside the castle and asked if they were residents. Another mercenary clarified that they lived outside the castle. The janitor interrupted, saying they needed to move on to official business and didn't have time for casual chatter. Some of the mercenaries grew suspicious, wondering if he was trying to act clever in front of the new owner. Now that the introductions were over, the janitor pulled out a magical stick that emitted glowing light, revealing the farmland just outside the castle. Dion was surprised at how wide it was. The janitor explained that because it bordered the castle, farming there came with difficulties. Though it looked abandoned, the responsibility would lie with Dion. Maintenance would be key. He outlined the agreement. The landlord would own 70% of the crops, and 40% of that would be taxable. Dion thought to himself about the taxes. Wasn't the land supposed to be abandoned? The janitor then pointed out the remaining peasants, stating that they would receive 30%. If Dion agreed, he could proceed to register at the management office. One mercenary nodded, saying he'd come as soon as the paperwork was done. He knew a deal would happen anyway, but if the harvest was bad, the peasants would be the ones to suffer. Bad harvests had become common, and living on 30% was tough. The janitor advised that they must avoid crop failure. If they were lucky, they could farm successfully. That was the nature of farming. The kingdom only lent the land. Responsibility for farming lay with its users. Dion controlled his emotions. He had almost made a mistake in his frustration. But now wasn't the time to stand out. He reminded himself not to be fooled by words and to steer the conversation toward the direction he wanted. It would be better to lighten the mood and take control calmly. As the introductions came to an end, the janitor turned to Dion and asked if there was anything else to say. He even offered him a seat. Dion responded with calm determination, stating that he had something to tell everyone. Just as the janitor prepared to leave due to his packed schedule, Dion politely stopped him, requesting a moment. Since the matter was related to farmland, he urged him to listen and pass the message to the management office and the castle. Dion then declared he would only take 10% of the harvest share. The surrounding mercenaries were stunned, repeating his words in disbelief. They questioned what he meant by taking only 10%. Dion clarified again. They would share 50% of the crops, with the remaining 40% going as taxes, leaving him with just 10%. The mercenaries couldn't make sense of it. Some wondered if he was doing it for the kingdom, chasing fame, or perhaps, as rumored, he was truly uninterested in profit. Whispered conversations broke out among them, doubting whether what they heard was even real. Dion could see their disbelief and admitted it was probably too shocking. Undine, standing beside him, commented the same. One mercenary spoke up, asking if it was really true. Dion firmly confirmed it was. The janitor, still skeptical, questioned if Dion was serious about this generous offer. Dion reaffirmed, stating he wouldn't repeat himself and wouldn't go back on his word. To add credibility, Undine summoned spirit magic. However, since the people couldn't see her, they believed Dion himself was casting it. Their shock and awe grew as they watched the magic unfold, impressed by the spirit magic he displayed. Standing tall, Dion invoked the name of the spirit he had contracted with, Undine, and placed his own name on the line, pledging that he spoke the truth and asked them to trust him. The mercenaries, filled with awe, began calling him the Saint of Water. The janitor, observing everything, realized the rumors were true. This was the man who had defeated Viscount Holton, an aura expert. Dion was indeed the Saint of Water. Though everything went as planned, the janitor couldn't shake a strange feeling. He had hoped things would proceed more quietly. With deep bows, the mercenaries expressed their gratitude, chanting the Saint of Water. Dion, overwhelmed by the title, felt embarrassed. It wasn't the title he sought. As the scene transitioned, Dion revealed that it was now 6 a.m. Time to open the Spirit's Treatment Center. It was located at the far outskirts of Holista. Despite the early hour, countless people were already waiting in line even before the doors opened. By 1 p.m., Dion finally got a chance to have lunch. As he ate, he remarked that the morning had been hectic. Undine agreed, saying that every day was busy and there were more customers than before. Dion explained that although the center was supposed to remain open until 6 p.m., afternoon arrivals were now flexible. He had moved the deadline to 3 p.m. instead. He mentioned that the change also took into account emergency situations and his relationship with the temple. In those cases, he had already spoken to the mercenary guild. Undine asked if that meant they were done for the day, and Dion confirmed. He now needed to focus on training. Undine asked if anyone had been recruited from the mercenary guild yet. Dion shared his desire to learn swordsmanship and aura management, but admitted it wasn't easy. At the moment, all he could do was build basic physical strength and manage his aura. He asked if Undine would join him. Without hesitation, she agreed, saying she would always go wherever Dion went. As she touched his arm, she noted that something felt off. The soft and fluffy feeling she used to like was gone, replaced with firmness. Dion explained it was because of his exercise. Undine expressed that she missed those softer days. Dion chuckled, recalling those times, and suggested they depart now. Dion then revealed that the previously purchased spirit stones were vital for Undine's growth. He had exchanged some for water spirit stones and acquired more from merchants. In total, Undine had consumed 5 spirit stones. Her growth since then was remarkable. Her ability to absorb and apply knowledge had become extraordinary. Most notably, she had grown taller. Once just 20 to 30 centimeters in length, she now stood at around 70 centimeters. However, despite her increased size, her childlike form remained unchanged. With no real basis for comparison, Dion sensed she had surpassed the lower spirit level. Undine questioned if Dion's standards for finding a teacher were too high. Dion admitted that aura experts were indeed rare and costly, and even 100 gold coins a month might not be enough. Undine remarked that it was a lot of money. Dion agreed, and reflected that even though he wasn't trying to master an advanced skill, he just wanted to learn the basics properly. But still, no one suitable could be found. Undine wondered aloud who it might be. Was it more important to find someone or to be found? Dion hoped to find the right person soon and suggested they rest nearby. Undine looked around, surprised that they had come so far she couldn't even see the treatment center anymore. Dion smiled and said he enjoyed the daily walks around the farmland. Undine agreed, saying it was truly a beautiful place. As they admired the preserved nature and the presence of many spirits, a sudden flash of bright light crashed down in front of them. As a powerful light descended before them, Undine immediately stepped forward, her voice fierce and protective. She warned that thing not to come closer, declaring that Dion belonged to her. Dion was caught off guard. His thoughts raced. Were these spirits? And why was Undine suddenly so agitated? The energy around them felt different, almost like a grand procession meant to greet someone significant. Among the approaching figures stood a wolf spirit, who acknowledged Undine's youth but noted the considerable strength she held. It speculated whether this strength came from her contractor. Undine, visibly tense, demanded to know why the wolf spirit had suddenly appeared despite never having met before. The wolf spirit explained that it had simply heard rumors about a child and had grown curious, not just about Undine, but also about her contractor. Dion noticed Undine's unease. It was the first time he had seen her react like this in any situation. He stepped in calmly, assuring her to leave the matter to him from that point on. Taking the lead, Dion formally introduced himself as Undine's contractor and established a stance before inviting further conversation. The wolf spirit seemed intrigued. It confirmed Dion's name, noting with surprise that he wasn't an elf, nor did he bear any of their blood. This surprised Dion. As expected, humans weren't usually capable of communicating with spirits. Yet the wolf spirit found it fascinating that Dion could understand spirit speech. Recognizing that the spirit in front of him was clearly of a higher rank than Undine, Dion decided to remain composed and cautious. The wolf spirit paused, feeling as though it had forgotten something. Dion asked if it knew what was going on, but Undine admitted she had no idea. Then the wolf spirit made a statement, acknowledging that the spirit beside Dion was superior in strength. The gap between itself and Undine wasn't even worth comparing. Finally, it recalled something. It had not recognized Dion at first because his name was human. This piqued Dion's interest. He asked if the wolf spirit knew him, to which it responded that it was impossible not to know someone so famous. As the conversation continued, the wolf spirit began transforming, slowly taking on a human form. Dion, reflecting on Undine's earlier words, realized this might indeed be a high-level spirit. The spirit finally introduced itself as Noes, a high-ranking earth spirit and the one in charge of this entire region, though the humans were completely unaware of that. Dion could feel the life force circulating through the ground, confirming Noah's presence and domain. Undine repeated it to herself, acknowledging that this was truly a high-ranking spirit. Noes revealed that he had heard their stories and had not expected to meet them face to face. Dion and Undine were both surprised. Noes explained that he had sensed a lingering scent, something so enticing that it drew him closer like an addiction. For a moment, he had forgotten the reason for his attraction, but a recent memory had brought it back. Dion asked for clarification, admitting that he knew very little and was still learning. There were so many questions swirling in his mind, and he requested an explanation. Noes, however, told him that it wasn't a matter of knowledge, but destiny. He expressed disbelief at how twisted that destiny seemed and admitted he couldn't speak further at the moment. Determined, Dion considered pushing further. Realizing the rare opportunity to gain insight from such a powerful spirit, he asked Noes if forming a contract would allow him to learn everything. Noes recognized Dion's clever attempt to test him, but refused, stating that he was already under contract with someone of very high rank. As such, accepting Dion's offer was impossible unless that original contract was broken. Accepting the response, Dion took a moment to mentally reorganize all the new information. Noes smiled, admitting he might have said too much simply because he was happy to meet Dion. Finally, he returned to Dion's original question and answered in his own way, stating that Dion, who called himself a spirit mage, was both a gateway and a Casanova. With that, the atmosphere settled once more, but the weight of No's words lingered deeply in Dion's heart. Dion turned to Nos, seeking clarity. She had mentioned a gateway and a Casanova, but her explanation remained vague. When he asked what exactly that meant, Noah simply told him that was all she could share for now. Dion realized she couldn't or wouldn't go into detail. Hoping for more, Dion looked to Undine, asking if she knew anything, but she admitted she didn't. Disappointed, Dion reflected that neither of them could provide a satisfying answer. Noah noticed Dion's dissatisfaction. She reminded him not to blame his spirit, as Undine still knew very little about him. She reassured him gently, calling him a good person at heart. Dion responded with calm understanding. Undine, feeling apologetic, confessed she still had much to learn. Dion encouraged her to stay strong in the meantime. Undine nodded, grateful for his support. While watching their exchange, Nos contemplated the moment. She wondered if Dion had finally overcome the twisted memory. But she knew it was only the beginning. The road ahead would be difficult. Fate had already started to move, and she believed it would be unkind to reveal too much now. Withholding more information she believed was the only mercy left. Before leaving, Noah said her farewell. But before vanishing, she had a message specifically for Undine. If Undine truly wanted to help her contractor, she should consider returning home at least once. There was still much she needed to learn, and just as Noah turned away, she added one final warning. If they planned to stay in this area, they should avoid a certain path. An ominous figure lay in that direction. Though she hadn't given them the full answers they were seeking, she expressed that it had been a pleasure meeting them. Wishing them well, she offered a parting blessing for those who walk the earth. Dion stood in silence, understanding now that in the end, he would have to uncover the truth on his own. Noah silently admitted to herself that it was frightening how this entire relationship had been shaped by twisted fate. And just like that, Noah vanished into thin air. Dion was startled by how suddenly she disappeared. Undine calmly concluded that she must have gone home. Dion wondered aloud, if she returned home, then that home must be the spirit world. Undine confirmed it. Since forming a contract with Dion, she hadn't gone back and now felt a little scared about returning. Sensing her hesitation, Dion gently placed his hand on her head. He told her that if it became necessary, she could return to the spirit world. But he reassured her that he would never force her to do so. Relieved, Undine softly thanked him. Then, shifting focus, Dion suggested they head toward the place Noah's mentioned earlier. Undine clarified. The one with the ominous guy? Dion agreed, noting that the man was just lying there unconscious. He believed it was the right thing to help. Undine agreed as well. If they had the power to help, they should. Dion affirmed that this was simply their way forward. Soon, Dion and Undine arrived at a place shrouded in dense black smoke. The dark haze pulsed with power, and Dion quickly sensed its corrosive nature. He realized the smoke was radiating immense energy, enough to rot the entire farmland if left unchecked. Undine noted the danger it posed, saying that a normal person's life would be at risk with such overwhelming energy present. Dion focused on stopping the damage from spreading. He suggested purifying the area using Undine's purification ability. Though unsure of the outcome, Undine agreed to try. She said the energy might be too strong, but she would begin by purifying the surrounding area first. Turning toward the sky, she concentrated her magic and began cleansing the space around them. Dion watched for a moment, then urged her to stop, thinking it was enough. But Undine refused, insisting the process wasn't complete. Dion pointed out that the smoke was still gathering and the purification wasn't working entirely. Undine acknowledged the challenge. The ominous energy was more powerful than she had expected. Dion then proposed a new approach. If they couldn't cleanse it, They should try locating its source. Undine prepared to move to a higher spot for a better view. She scanned the area and soon spotted something. She informed Dion that she had found the source. It was close by. Dion asked if they could head there immediately. Undine confirmed that it wasn't far. The only reason it remained hidden was because of the thick, ominous fog surrounding it. As they moved forward, Dion noticed that everything in the vicinity was contaminated. The land felt unnatural. Undine observed that the spread of the energy must have been caused by a sudden event. The corrupt energy was scattered chaotically. Dion sensed the power increasing as they drew closer to the source. He wondered if it was just his imagination, but Undine confirmed his feeling. The energy truly intensified as they neared the core. She pointed out a specific area, saying they had likely reached their destination. Looking at it closely, Dion found it hard to believe. But standing before them was indeed the source of the ominous power. Dion and Undine arrived at an old house and forcefully broke the door to enter. Dion asked if it was all right to go in, and Undine noted that although the door broke by accident, it should be fine since the place seemed abandoned. Inside, Dion urged her to stay alert and look around carefully in case anyone involved in the strange events was present. Undine summoned a soft, glowing light in her palm to help illuminate the interior. Dion appreciated the thoughtful gesture, while Undine humbly mentioned it was just a basic skill. As they moved forward, Dion spotted something ahead and asked Undine to move the light toward the center. She followed his direction, and the light revealed a person lying on the floor. Dion was shocked at the sight, noticing green hair, and suddenly realized something. The person radiating the ominous aura. It was someone they knew. Undine quickly warned him not to get too close, but Dion reassured her. He recognized the figure and stepped forward, thinking about whether Nose had already known this would happen. The ominous presence wasn't just anyone, it was tied to them personally. As they got closer, it became clear. The unconscious person was Telly. Dion's mind raced with possibilities. Maybe she had been attacked by the remnants of the Red Blade, or perhaps it was linked to the curse that Inserian had mentioned earlier. At that moment, only those two explanations made sense. But before jumping to conclusions, he decided they needed to help her first. He knew interfering directly might be dangerous, so he considered asking Undine for support. Dion turned to her, asking if healing Telly might help stop the ominous energy. Undine explained that this was the first time they had encountered someone like Telly, but since they had previously helped Inserian recover, it might not be impossible. Still, she couldn't guarantee it would remove the ominous energy. Dion acknowledged the difference between Telly's situation and Inserian's, but emphasized that they couldn't abandon her. He asked Undine to try applying healing water to the wound on Telly's arm. Undine agreed. As Dion observed, ominous energy leaked from the many scars across Telly's body. Undine began healing her using her ability. Dion noted that as her wounds closed, the ominous energy started to fade. Undine confirmed the healing was working and said she would try to cure Telly completely. Dion encouraged her to go ahead. Though unsure of the outcome, Undine promised to give it her best. She focused all her power on treating Telly. Slowly, the wounds vanished, and with them, the ominous aura disappeared. Dion felt relieved. The danger seemed to have passed. Undine then asked about Telly's current condition. Dion replied that the treatment appeared successful and thanked her. Just then, Telly began to regain consciousness. However, Undine noticed something unusual. She told Dion that something felt off and wondered if the healing had somehow made things worse. Dion was confused by her concern. Undine explained that something was wrong with Telly. Dion questioned what the problem could be. Undine asked if he could feel the strange aura. It seemed as though Telly might become hostile. Dion disagreed, stating that Telly would never harm them. He believed she was simply unwell. But then, Dion began piecing things together. He recalled what Inserian had told him about the curse. It wasn't just about seductive power. Vampires didn't eat normal food like soup or bread, they craved blood. He had never seen Telly drink blood before, which led him to suspect that the curse was blood-related. He shared this realization with Undine, explaining that Telly's curse had likely been triggered. Undine agreed, saying the eerie feeling might be a result of that curse. Dion admitted that while he couldn't sense it directly, something felt different. Undine believed the aura was growing stronger. Suddenly, a powerful aura erupted from Telly's body. Both Dion and Undine were taken aback. Dion questioned what was happening, while Undine recognized the size of the aura, massive and overwhelming. As Telly's condition worsened, Undine immediately warned Dion about an incoming shockwave. Acting quickly, she conjured a protective water shield around them, saving them from the brunt of the impact. Dion, alarmed by the sudden outburst of power, wondered if the curse had forced Telly to awaken. Her overwhelming strength was frightening. Concerned, Dion asked if Telly could still recognize them. Undine noted that the curse seemed to have taken over her, suggesting Dion should be the one to try reaching out. Dion regretted healing her, realizing it may have triggered something darker. Their first step now was to bring her back to her senses. He stepped forward and addressed her. Telly responded, identifying him as the mysterious elementalist. Dion tried grounding her in reality, explaining he was nearby for training. Still, it was clear that Telly's mind wasn't stable. Telly suddenly urged him to flee, warning him of danger. Then a demonic voice emerged from within her, demanding blood. Telly resisted, refusing to submit. Dion, overwhelmed by confusion, stood frozen. Telly desperately shouted for him to escape. The voice spoke again, taunting her and hungering for blood. At the same moment, Dion noticed black smoke pouring from Telly's wound. Realizing the situation had become far more dangerous, he voiced his concern. Undine admitted they might have made a critical mistake. When Dion questioned her, she explained that Telly had likely been suppressing the curse on her own. The black fog in her wounds were signs of a struggle before they intervened. Healing her physical injuries had only reawakened the dormant curse. Now it was active and spiraling out of control. Undine asked what Dion planned to do next. Dion firmly declared he wouldn't run away. Saving Telly remained their priority. Undine, expecting his response, acknowledged it. Telly began screaming, her voice full of pain and chaos. Undine warned that lifting the curse would come at a cost. Whether good or bad, the process would be difficult for Telly. Moments later, Telly collapsed unconscious, but without warning, her eyes snapped open. Dion and Undine were shocked. In the blink of an eye, Telly vanished. Suddenly, she reappeared midair and launched herself at Dion. Before the attack could land, Undine retaliated with a swift water strike, intercepting Telly just in time. She rushed to Dion, asking if he was injured. Dion assured her he was fine, grateful for her perfect timing. But Undine warned that it wasn't over yet. Dion urged caution. Observing Telly, he realized she had completely lost control. Unless they acted fast, both of them could be in serious danger. Undine predicted another assault was coming. Dion knew they couldn't attack her recklessly. They had to stop her without causing harm. He wondered if there was any way to restore her consciousness before it was too late. As the tension built, Telly raised her hand and began chanting. Her voice echoed with power as she invoked her bloodline, one that controlled the abyss. The night's black void responded, emitting a crimson-red glow. Her chant called forth a terrifying power, demanding the crimson gem to grant her its strength. Dion immediately sensed the overwhelming force before him and realized the horrifying truth. Telly had been completely consumed by the power of the curse. Without hesitation, Undine launched a water attack toward the dark energy surrounding Telly. Dion, stunned by her actions, questioned Undine's intent. But Undine quickly pointed out the rising danger, urging him to look closely. Her attack had failed. Instead of weakening the force, it had been absorbed completely. Panic set in as Undine admitted their attacks weren't working. She warned that they needed to retreat before it was too late. Dion hesitated, wondering if there was still a way to stop Telly. But Undine made it clear they were out of time. Telly's appearance had changed drastically. Dion could barely recognize her anymore. Undine, alert and alarmed, warned him again as Telly prepared another devastating attack. She declared her next strike would be a continuation of the last. The moment she attacked, Dion instinctively dodged. He was shocked by his own speed, realizing he had never moved like that before. Another attack followed, and once again he managed to evade it. Dion then noticed something. He could read Telly's movements. The realization hit him. This was Undine's sense-sharing ability. If they used aura in tandem with that ability, they could predict and dodge Telly's attacks. However, the effect would only last a few seconds. Still, only Undine had the strength to counter Telly. But Dion didn't want Telly to get hurt either. Dodging wasn't a solution. They had to find a way to bring her back. Telly charged again, this time anticipating Dion's evasion. He was deceived. The attack caught him off guard, but Undine intercepted with another water strike. Dion was stunned by her timing, but the relief didn't last. Telly absorbed the attack again, leaving Dion shaken. He began doubting whether they could save her at all. Even with the right intentions, the outcome could turn tragic. Suddenly, Telly stopped attacking. Dion noticed something strange. Her arm had shifted unnaturally. Looking over, he saw that Undine had been restrained. Chains had wrapped around her, binding her movements. With a chilling smile, Telly mocked them. She recognized the power within Undine and questioned whether it came from her spirit or her blood. Then she turned to Dion, who pleaded with her to fight the curse. But Telly, now completely overtaken, laughed coldly at his resistance. Dion tried to move, but his body wouldn't respond. The curse had paralyzed him. Telly stepped closer, revealing that she had waited for this moment ever since their fateful encounter. Her tone grew darker. She addressed him by name, acknowledging him as the mysterious spirit mage. Dion, helpless, could only watch. Telly leaned in, her voice twisted with malice, wondering aloud about the color and flavor of his blood. Telly sank her fangs into Dion's neck, draining his blood. As his strength faded, Dion found himself enveloped in a hazy, immersive sensation. The fear of dying was replaced by an overwhelming, unnatural pleasure that clouded his mind and body. Despite knowing the danger, he wondered if this was truly how he would die, at the hands of a vampire. Bound in chains, Undine watched the scene unfold in horror, unable to help. Some time passed. Dion slowly opened his eyes, confused. He recalled being bitten by Telly but couldn't remember anything afterward. As he fully regained consciousness, he turned his head and saw Undine, expressing relief that she was safe. Undine, overjoyed, welcomed him back and asked how he felt. Dion replied that he was fine and asked if she was okay too. Undine confirmed it, expressing gratitude that the situation hadn't grown worse and vowing not to let it happen again. Dion then asked about Telly's current state. Undine immediately dismissed the topic, her voice filled with frustration. Dion tried to understand if her anger was due to Telly's attack. Undine confirmed it, stating that someone who hurt him couldn't be forgiven. She admitted to hating Telly, but Dion felt differently. He blamed himself. He believed his actions, though well-intentioned, had caused more harm than good. He acknowledged that he'd acted impulsively without proper preparation and had likely made things harder for everyone. Reflecting on his past self, he realized that once, he would have approached the situation cautiously. His recent arrogance and baseless confidence had only led to disaster. Still, if he had done nothing, Telly might have been lost completely. He paused, admitting he couldn't remember what happened after the bite. Undine asked what he meant, and Dion explained that, after losing consciousness, his memory went blank. Undine asked if he was curious. She admitted she didn't know how to explain it, and if he truly wanted to know, he'd have to ask someone else, though she didn't like the idea. Dion quickly realized she was referring to Telly. At that moment, Telly arrived at the gate. Undine tensed up, suggesting they leave without engaging her. But Dion refused. He believed the fault was his and that Telly too had her own story. He didn't want to judge her without understanding the full truth. Undine, still upset, snapped that she didn't care and admitted she hated Dion for this too. Telly stepped inside and asked if she could enter. Dion welcomed her in. Telly noted she had sensed his presence and confirmed he had awakened. She asked how he was feeling. Dion replied that he felt better, thanks to Undine, and asked if Telly was all right now. He then told Telly he had a question. Telly responded with a brief acknowledgement. Dion, glancing toward Undine, told Telly she could go ahead and ask whatever she wanted. Telly didn't hesitate. She asked why Dion had been there in the first place. Dion gestured for her to sit, saying he too had many questions. He suggested they talk through everything together. Dion began recounting what he knew, how Telly ended up in Hollister after leaving the Warriors, and the sequence of events that followed. Telly had apparently learned about recent developments through the guild. Then she asked Dion a serious question, if he truly wanted to get stronger. Dion explained that for spirit magic to be effective, the caster needed to be strong. If the user collapsed, even the most powerful spirit would be useless. Telly pressed further, implying there was more to it. Dion admitted that strength also offered freedom and opened up new possibilities. Telly pointed out that those were just two sides of the same desire. She asked if he was planning to pursue aura swordsmanship. Dion said he was trying different things, but admitted that learning aura swordsmanship techniques was proving difficult. Telly disagreed. She believed Dion had tremendous potential and recalled the power he had shown. However, she added that if he was aiming for the level of masters like in Syrian or Cylon, the standards would be incredibly high. Dion clarified that he wasn't planning to learn directly from them, but was looking to follow his own path. Telly warned him not to misunderstand. Having high-level skills didn't guarantee someone could teach well. Dion acknowledged her point and asked his own question. What had truly happened after he lost consciousness? Telly, unfazed, noted that his suspicion was expected. She asked if he truly wanted to know. Dion felt a sudden chill. Telly warned him that sometimes it was wiser not to know everything. Still, she offered to tell him, but reminded him that seeking the truth came with responsibility. Dion reflected on the idea of responsibility, wondering if this was a cautionary tale about owning one's choices and enduring the consequences. Still, he wanted to know how everything had ended. Telly glanced at Undine with a subtle smile. Dion, determined, requested Telly to share the truth. Telly acknowledged his decision. She clarified that while her earlier words may have sounded vague, her intention was simply to urge caution. In truth, nothing significant had happened after that. She asked if Dion needed a reminder of how he ended up in that state. Dion questioned whether it was due to a curse. Telly confirmed it. Unlike typical half-breeds, she explained, their kind was afflicted by a rare curse that appeared only in certain generations. The blood curse behaved differently in each case. Once triggered, it corrupted the host with malevolent energy, becoming so dangerous that it required immediate intervention from their group to suppress. Dion realized that Undine had been right all along. He acknowledged the terrifying strength of the curse. Telly elaborated that, at the first signs, the afflicted should either restrain themselves or harm their own bodies to contain the dark force. Dion apologized for not understanding earlier. Telly reassured him. This wasn't about blame, she said, it was a warning. Her words about being careful carried deeper meaning, which she believed Dion now grasped. Dion reflected again. It all boiled down to responsibility. Telly concluded the explanation and prepared to recount what happened afterward. Dion braced himself, curious to learn what truly occurred. Telly then revealed the truth. He had been saved by a high-ranking spirit named Noah's. Dion tried to recall. Was it really Noah's? A flashback followed. At the moment when Telly had been drinking Dion's blood, Noah's suddenly appeared. It ordered her to stop, warning her not to cause trouble in its territory, and declaring that she had crossed a forbidden boundary. Telly responded by questioning the idea of spirits owning parts of the world, and challenged Noah's claim. But Noah's cut through her argument, offering mercy and demanding she release Dion and leave immediately. Realizing she couldn't fight a prepared high-ranking spirit, Telly had backed down. Though the curse within her was consumed, she surrendered without resistance. Back in the present, Telly shared that she hadn't been ready to face someone like Noah's. Comparing it to challenging a seasoned wizard, she admitted her defeat. Dion listened, understanding now why Noah's had intervened. It likely knew about the connection between him and Telly. He silently acknowledged his debt to Noah's. Meanwhile, Undine watched Telly with suspicion. She wondered what secrets Telly still hid, and whether there was someone out there Dion couldn't deal with alone. Telly then asked if Dion had any other questions. Dion responded that if someone doesn't ask, the other won't tell. Was that the case here? Telly reminded him of what she had said earlier and asked him to consider it her form of kindness. Dion accepted it. He reminded himself that some truths were better left unknown. Even if he learned them, keeping such truths was difficult. He promised to be more cautious moving forward. Telly praised his attitude. In her mind, she admitted that curiosity was natural, but Dion's behavior intrigued her even more. His way of speaking and acting felt out of place in this world, just like the architecture of the mysterious building they were in. She then told Dion that no matter how much she observed him, there was something special about him. He appeared far older than he looked. Dion replied that it was possible. She found his answer ambiguous. Dion added that sometimes it was wiser to let go of certain things without digging deeper. Telly agreed and asked him to keep all of this a secret between them. Dion promised to do so. He then asked if she was leaving already and suggested they share a meal after so long. Telly declined, saying others were probably already worried about them. Dion understood and offered to deliver her greetings to the others. Telly appreciated it, expressing that she owed him for what happened and would surely repay the debt. Dion thought to himself. Those were the same words Insirian had once said. He wished Telly well on her way back. As she left, she expressed hope that next time, they could all be together. The scene then shifted. High above, Nose and another mysterious figure observed Dion and the others from a distance. The unknown man asked if everything would be all right. Nose responded that it seemed to have wrapped up smoothly. The man questioned Dion's identity. He was astonished that a high-ranking spirit would step in without having signed a contract with him. He had never encountered such a strange human before. The man wondered aloud if even he was missing something. Noah's answered cryptically, stating that it had no right to speak for lower beings. The man should ask Dion himself. Frustrated, the man said Dion kept avoiding him. He considered arranging a meeting, suggesting they needed a new guardian for the tower. He even joked that Noah's had been absent too often lately because of someone. Noah's replied sternly, saying its body was already bound to the earth and that reckless behavior was inappropriate. The man confessed he didn't want to escalate things either. Violence wasn't an option. But perhaps, he suggested, they could summon Dion instead. Nose rejected that idea as well. Still pressing, the man insisted, saying they should just go to the new house. 3 months had passed since Telly left Holista. During this time, Dion attempted to thank Noah's, but the spirit never appeared. Soon after, a swordsman mercenary, who had remained hidden until now, was finally recruited. The masked man revealed his name, Dyke. He turned out to be a superior mercenary whom Dion had once injured by severing his arm. Dyke, now healed, introduced himself as the captain responsible for training the Holista scout unit and refused any payment, hinting that his presence was part of Telly's way of repaying Dion, not with money, but with what he truly needed. It became clear that Dyke's help was arranged by Telly. Since then, he arrived at the training ground behind the infirmary every day without fail, dedicating himself entirely to training Dion in swordsmanship. During one of these sessions, Dyke instructed Dion to finish his attack using aura and ensure complete destruction. Dion stood ready with his sword, but Dyke suddenly appeared in front of him and pointed out his slow reaction. He warned Dion not to lower his guard and reminded him that standing still made him an easy target. Dion responded by anticipating Dyke's movements and launched an attack, which Dyke blocked. Dyke praised Dion's momentum but emphasized that an opponent who fails to attack should be taken down in a single blow. He explained that when an attack is blocked and multiple enemies are present, a strong counterattack could open dangerous gaps. Suddenly, Dyke kicked Dion, sending him sliding backward. Dion immediately noticed the ferocity of Dyke's combination attack, fast, powerful, and concentrated. As Dyke charged with his sword, he challenged Dion to block the next strike. Success would mark the end of today's class. Dion focused, realizing it was not about dodging but blocking and then countering. As Dyke's powerful attack came in, Dion positioned his sword in front. Dyke was impressed. Dion managed to concentrate his aura and block without dispersing it, a feat even aura experts found difficult. He began to wonder if Dion had truly become an expert in just 3 months. Dion, thinking he had blocked everything, suddenly noticed Dyke's sword grazing past his foot. Though he dodged, the clash caused Dion's sword to break in the middle. Dyke acknowledged the unfortunate ending but praised Dion's effort. Dion expressed his thanks. Dyke admitted he should have controlled his strength better and hadn't expected the sword to break. Dion explained that the sword had become worn out and could no longer hold up. Dyke observed that Dion's skills were improving rapidly and suggested it was time he used a better sword. Dion agreed and mentioned visiting the blacksmith to inquire. He invited Dyke to come along, offering to make healing water afterwards. Dyke accepted the gesture gratefully. Outside, Dion and Undine walked together. When Undine asked where they were heading, Dion told her about the broken sword and the visit to the blacksmith. She complimented him for blocking the attacks of an aura expert, impressed by his performance. Dion credited his improvement to Dyke's effective training methods, noting that Telly had introduced them to an excellent teacher. He reflected internally. It was also a talent to absorb someone's teachings and make them one's own. He wondered if he had been this skilled in a past life, both physically and in terms of abilities. It felt like something new was developing within him in this world. Undine noticed his serious expression and asked what he was thinking. Dion explained he was curious about his own abilities, but still lacked clarity. He admitted to not understanding even basic things like what a Casanova meant. Despite lacking spiritual power, he had formed a contract with the spirit and possessed exceptional physical abilities. His rapid growth in mastering aura and swordsmanship felt remarkable. Undine affirmed that he was traveling to uncover the truth. Dion agreed, but felt that he was still just at the starting point of his journey. As they reached the village, Undine hoped they'd find a good sword at the blacksmith shop. Dion, too, was determined to buy a proper sword this time. Inside the blacksmith shop, Dion examined the weapons on display. He recalled how he used to rely on cheap, low-quality weapons sold on the streets. Compared to those, everything here looked exceptional. Picking up a sword, he found it quite satisfactory. Meanwhile, Undine picked up a dagger, noting that it seemed like Dion could handle it well. Dion admitted the dagger was fine, but felt somewhat rough. He expressed a desire to forge a well-crafted dagger made from superior metal, shaped like a combat knife. Undine asked if he wasn't planning to buy one, especially after all the training he'd gone through. Dion explained that he still had enough daggers left, and that his goal today was to purchase a sword. The shop owner approached and asked if Dion had made his decision. Dion clarified that he wasn't a saint, but a spirit mage, and confirmed he would buy the swords he'd selected. The owner pointed out that the type of sword he chose was typically used by knights and asked if Dion intended to carry it himself. Dion requested a strap so he could wear the sword on his back. Suddenly a voice echoed in Dion's ears, faintly pleading for help. Shocked, Dion froze, and Undine recognized it as a spirit's voice. They followed the trail, and along the way, Undine noted the voice had been cut off at a certain point. Dion reasoned that the spirit must be nearby. Undine reminded him that spirits could exist anywhere, not bound by physical spaces. Dion speculated that something might have happened when the spirit cried for help and questioned whether other spirits had heard the call or if it was just them. He turned to Undine and asked for a favor, whether she could enhance his sensing ability to the maximum level. Undine understood his intention to explore the surroundings and prepared immediately. Rising into the air, she activated her ability. Dion focused as their senses synchronized. He noted that specific spiritual senses could be shared among spirits, making it possible to detect traces of others. Searching beyond the city limits, he began filtering clues. An area on the outskirts, possibly a tent or a vendor's stall. A place where swords were gathered, maybe gems or even a crystal. Eventually, he locked onto a location. As Dion connected with the spirit's energy, a shock hit him, causing Undine to panic momentarily. Dion assured her he was fine, but remained disturbed. He sensed that something had interfered with his access, and the place felt more like a prison than anything else. Soon after, Dion and Undine reached a specific location. Undine mentioned she couldn't see anything unusual and questioned if they were in the right spot. Dion insisted that the clues, being on the outskirts and having swords piled up, led them here. Undine repeated the idea of swords being piled up, and Dion reasoned it had to be a knight's facility or a blacksmith's workshop. Army facilities were located in the city center for defense, and the weapon shop they had already visited, leaving only the blacksmith's workshop as the likely place. They moved forward, and Dion called out a greeting. A man appeared and informed them that the shop was closed for the day and asked them to return tomorrow. Dion asked if he was Sanson, which surprised the man. He asked how Dion knew his name. Dion greeted him warmly, and Sanson recognized him as the Saint of Water. Dion asked about Sanson's injured hand from before. Sanson explained that he continued using the healing water each morning and was doing well because of it. Dion reflected that Sanson was the chief apprentice of the blacksmith. In the past, Sanson had severely injured his hand and received healing from Dion. Since then, he became a regular customer, consistently purchasing healing water. Sanson noted that it was already late and asked about Dion's reason for visiting. Dion apologized for the sudden request and asked to see some items. Sanson agreed, but mentioned that it required the master's permission, though he was confident it would be granted since the master was already familiar with Dion. Dion accepted and asked for guidance. Sanson told him to follow, and together they moved deeper into the workshop. Dion turned to Sanson and asked if he had a water bottle or a cup. Sanson nodded and pointed to a large water bottle and a cup nearby. Dion said he couldn't visit empty-handed, so he decided to make some healing water. Grateful, Sanson thanked him and allowed him to use the items. Dion then asked Undine if it was okay to try something. Undine replied that it now seemed entirely possible to extend time. As they continued walking, Sanson informed them they were almost there. Arriving at the main area, Sanson called out to his master, mentioning they had a guest. The master was surprised at the late visit, but assumed the guest must be important since Sanson had brought him personally. When Sanson introduced Dion as the Saint of Water who had healed his hands, Dion introduced himself as a spirit mage. The master recognized him as Sanson's benefactor and asked what brought him here at such an hour. Sanson explained that Dion might be looking for something and asked if he could take a look around. The master agreed without hesitation, stating that anyone who helped Sanson was a benefactor to him as well. At that moment, Undine activated her ability, causing water to fall gently from above. The master looked on in confusion. Undine returned to Dion, proudly stating that she had succeeded in extending time. Dion thanked her and acknowledged that it was likely possible because of her growth. As a token of appreciation, Dion handed the master some healing water, thanking him for the warm welcome despite the sudden visit. The master was surprised and grateful, saying it wasn't necessary but appreciated. Dion noted that the healing potion's effect would last until the following morning. The master decided to drink it that very night and encouraged Dion to look around freely, without any hesitation. Sanson told the master he would return shortly. Dion thanked him for his kindness. As they moved through the area, Sanson asked if Dion was looking for swords, armor, or something else. Dion admitted he didn't have a clear goal and asked for a general tour. Sanson agreed and assured him that while he wasn't sure what Dion was looking for, the master's products were trustworthy. Dion said he was looking forward to it. Opening a door, Sanson led Dion into a secure section, explaining that the best blacksmith in Hollister kept his premium items there. Inside, Dion looked over the weapons. Many swords looked appealing at first glance, but he reminded himself that he wasn't here for just anything. Undine approached Dion and said she didn't think the item they were seeking was there. Dion wondered aloud if they had come to the wrong place and asked if there were other swords besides those on display. Sanson asked if Dion was looking for something specific. Dion complimented the swords but felt they weren't suitable for his current level. Sanson recognized that Dion was still in the midst of sword training. He explained that training swords and cheaper secondhand items were located outside, as they required the blacksmith's work before being usable. Dion acknowledged this. Suddenly, Undine noticed something. Drawn to one particular sword, she sensed darkness and coldness emanating from it, an aura filled with anger, loneliness, and sadness. Dion wondered where Undine had gone and spotted her near the sword, realizing she may have found something. Undine confirmed it. She said this was the place and that the sword was here. Dion asked how it looked. The sword matched the image he had seen before. Though uncertain, curiosity compelled him to confront it directly. He reached out and grabbed the sword. Immediately, Undine called out his name in alarm. A spirit burst out from the sword, radiating anger. It demanded to know who disturbed it and accused the intruder of trying to use it again, vowing not to forgive such intentions. Dion calmly responded, expressing that he had no desire to use the spirit. Still, he sensed a gloomy, dark feeling, a frustrating heaviness that reminded him of being in a prison. Just then, the master entered, astonished that Dion had chosen that sword. He remarked that a normal person wouldn't have noticed it. He acknowledged that Dion, as the saint, must possess a special ability to locate that sword so quickly. Dion stood before the old, weathered sword, his eyes narrowing with curiosity. He sensed something strange about it. A trapped spirit lay dormant within, something no ordinary person would notice. Sanson, unaware of this, recalled hearing it was just a sword sold by a wandering mercenary. He couldn't understand what made it so unusual. But Dion's master seemed certain. There was no way Dion didn't know what lay hidden within that blade. Sanson, puzzled, turned to the master, asking if he too had known about the sword's secret. The master confirmed calmly that every sword carried its own tale, a history etched into its steel. Dion nodded in agreement. Swords with stories were indeed fascinating, and something about this one called to him. He stared at the blade, thinking to himself. Then, after a brief pause, he made up his mind. He wanted to buy it. Sanson, still uncertain, looked to his master for guidance. The master observed the sword carefully and explained that it was so rusty it barely came out of the scabbard. Yet, strangely, it didn't corrode any further. He had sensed something back then. This was no ordinary weapon. The sword might have once belonged to a hero or perhaps was an unnamed magic blade. But if it had been discarded in such a state, there was also a chance it was cursed. The master looked at Dion and asked if he still wished to buy the sword. Dion glanced at Undine and wondered if the others hadn't realized the spirit sealed inside. He told himself there was no need to reveal the truth. Undine softly advised that it would be better if he didn't. Dion agreed. He couldn't miss this opportunity. Undine encouraged him to go through with it, reminding him to be sure about the purchase. Dion, determined, declared once more that he truly wanted the sword. He approached the master again and stated his decision clearly. The master looked at him with surprise and acknowledged the saint's resolve. The price, he said, was just 1 copper. As the master watched him, a thought crossed his mind. Had the sword finally found its true owner? Dion, in turn, was surprised by how cheap it was. The master explained that all the rusty swords lying there were simply waiting for the ones destined to wield them. They could be melted to forge new blades, but this sword had potential. It could be honed and sharpened to allow its wielder to demonstrate true power. He believed that Dion finding this sword wasn't mere chance, it was destiny. He hoped Dion would use it well and expressed his anticipation for what lay ahead. Dion turned to Undine, pleased that he had purchased it at a lower price than expected. Undine smiled and remarked that the master was very kind. Dion handed over the single copper coin and took the sword in his hands. With a quiet word of thanks, he bowed respectfully. The master gave a final nod and slowly walked away, leaving Dion and Undine alone with the mysterious blade that had finally found its purpose. Back at the clinic, Dion returned with Undine, the sword still tightly sealed in its scabbard. Undine immediately sensed something ominous. The energy radiating from the sword was dark and malevolent, the kind that binds spirits. A wave of evil pulsed from the blade, and Undine admitted there was nothing she could do about it. Dion acknowledged the same. Though he didn't fully understand its nature, even a single glance revealed the sword's hostility. Its enmity was open and undeniable. He wondered if it was the spirit within that had rejected them, or perhaps the sword's own power was resisting their presence. He wanted to speak with the spirit, but there seemed to be no way to do so. Then another thought crossed his mind. Maybe the rust was the problem. Perhaps the corroded metal was what kept the sword sealed so tightly. If that was the case, then there was a way to move forward. Summoning his spirit energy, Dion channeled it into the sword. The moment his power touched it, the sword reacted violently. Cracks formed along its surface, and the blade began to tremble. Suddenly, shards and fragments flew in every direction. One razor-sharp piece surged toward Dion's face, but Undine acted swiftly. She stepped in front of him and conjured a protective shield with her spirit energy. The fragment struck the barrier instead. In that moment, Dion realized the sword's power was immense. He questioned whether it was rejecting him outright or if it was merely acting out of unconscious defense. The strength of the reaction was overwhelming. Undine, struggling to hold her shield together, warned him that the sword's energy was too strong. Even her barrier couldn't contain its force. She was shocked at how much power the blade held. Without hesitation, Dion drew his own sword and pushed forward, attempting to subdue the violent energy. Through the clash of forces, he turned to Undine and asked if she was all right. Undine reassured him with a smile. Though the situation had been dangerous, she was unharmed and thanked him for his quick action. Then, through the fading echoes of the sword's rage, they heard something unexpected. Singing. Dion caught it first. A soft humming sound drifted through the air, mournful and delicate. There was a deep sadness within it, a painful emotion that weighed heavily on his heart. Undine asked if he could truly hear it. Dion confirmed that he could. It wasn't just music, it was emotion, a soul crying out in sorrow. Undine pointed toward the gem embedded in the sword. Within its core, something was stirring. As they looked closer, a figure emerged from within the sword. The female's voice trembled with desperation. It wasn't her will to be bound. She was in pain. She pleaded for help.